squad. Now CJ brings the fire, no facade. Word game sharper than a ninja's blade. Every Sunday we got the arcade made. From Twitch to the globe we taking flight. Brooklyn roots, though we shine worldwide. Press start if you're ready to vibe. The Game Lounge crew keeping it live. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, no hit pause. For the gamers we the cause. Cheat codes, now we play raw. Gather round, don't to the Game Lounge. Welcome to the Game Lounge. The Game Lounge. Welcome to 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 the Game
What is up? What is up? What is up? What is happening?
Everybody know what's happening. They know what's happening.
What happened to the studio? What's happened to our studio? God damn it. Ah, there you go. I got the studio back.
Kitty said we saw everything.
We got the studio back. What's up, y'all? What is going on?
Yes.
What's happening?
They know what goddamn time it is.
We know what time it is, people. We know what time it is. Come on now. Drop a goddamn bomb.
Yes, let's get the show started.
New York is going all the way the fuck up today.
Yes, let's get this fucking started.
New York is going all the way.
Welcome to the
fuck
Game
up
Lounge,
today.
everybody. Season 3, episode 30. I am your host, Golden Crush 200, aka Mr. 200.
Yes, indeed.
And it's New York Day, baby.
It's New York Day.
So we woke up champions in this motherfucker. You hear me?
The fact that you thought you remember it was episode 30, that's a big thing. Get clapping up for that. So,
Introducing.
we got a lot of things to talk about. Those of you that don't know, I am CJ the DJ and the co-host and y'all favorite DJ. To clap that up for sure. And guess what?
Our queen is back.
She's back. Clap it up for her too. Clap it up for her
First
too.
time back since Cole Xavier's got here.
Yes, indeed. So, if y'all don't know and if y'all did not read our caption, New York Knicks has finally got their championship.
50 plus years.
53.
53 goddamn years.
Shout outs to Jalen
Brunson. Brunson is the fucking
and the whole
right
squad.
Now.
Shout out to OG for the tip. The
Yep.
tip in.
Oh my
God. That tip
Bro.
was crazy.
Bro came out of nowhere. He said,
Yes, that was so
Yes.
great.
he said, I got you, Cap.
Like
And it went
he
in.
flew
Yo,
from
it was
he
perfect.
flew from half court
Bro.
like this.
And he said, bing.
In there, get me in there.
And that's what gave us the win.
It's like he just knew the shit was gonna go in.
Oh my God.
It was
my
destined.
God.
I ain't gonna do one.
Yeah.
It was destined.
It was.
It was there. It was amazing.
It was.
Right before the seconds went down, though.
Bro,
Yeah.
we won by because of
But
that.
But because of that,
Because of that.
1.2 seconds left on the clock after the tip.
Oh my God.
What?
That's luck, for real.
Oh
That's some
my God.
Oh.
six-man shit.
That's
Facts.
really 6-man shit.
Facts.
That's 6-man shit
Facts.
right there. Oh, we got a
Rose
raid.
City
Rose
with the
City.
raid. Welcome in, Ro with
Drop
the
a bomb
raid.
for Rose City.
Can we get a shout out for Ro, please?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Drop a bomb for Kitty because best mod.
Best mod
mod.
in the world. Yes.
Drop a bomb for Koza because Koza in there. Best mod too.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
Best other than other Mar too, because you know he got the Discord going and the website going, and he's our behind the scenes guy. We chat it over.
Shout out to
So
my
drop a
man.
ball for Koza for that.
Detroit Koza.
Yes, indeed.
Made Mafia.
Made Mafia. Drop a bomb for Made Mafia.
Gotta drop a bomb.
Gotta drop a bomb for Made Mafia. Dirty Dan's in the building.
Dirty Dan.
Gotta drop a bomb for Dirty Dan too. God damn it.
Goddamn Knicks, baby.
The goddamn drop a bomb for the Knicks.
Drop a bomb.
Drop a bomb for New York. We dropping mad bombs today. We dropping mad bombs today.
God.
It's I'm too hyped. I'm too hyped. Too happy for the
I'm
Knicks.
happy for them. Yeah, that's
And it's
good.
been a long time coming. If y'all don't know, the Knicks has been fighting. Like if y'all watch the basketball seasons, you'll see them get to the playoffs and then get knocked out, or they get right there to the
second round.
before
We
you
usually
start.
get to the second round and then we
We get knocked right out. Oh man, you get to the wild card and get knocked out too. Like, God damn. So the fact that we actually swept.
We took it.
We swept for the championship on the Eastern Conference, and then took these
We were
niggas
bullies
out.
in that final. Bullies.
Oh yeah.
The whole final we was bullies.
Oh yeah.
We was bullies.
We was on our bully bull.
We won the last 2 games on a comeback.
Yes.
Historical deficit comeback.
29 points.
Those were historical
crazy.
deficit comebacks. You know that, right?
Yes, for the finals.
NBA
yeah.
Finals history.
That shit is crazy, bro. Crazy.
They
But
went out with a bang.
shout outs to y'all for always showing up to the game notch every Sunday, 6 p.m. Standard Time. Drop a bomb for that. Yes, indeed. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
I mean, it's for the
appreciate
biddies.
that.
Dirty
Bestie
Dan with the
bits
biddies.
with the bestie bits.
Drop a bomb for the biddies.
Appreciate
Drop a bomb for the biddies. Gotta drop a bomb for the biddies. So let's get into it, y'all. Let's take a look at what New York has in store for us.
Kitty, appreciate you.
Drop a bomb for Kitty with the biddies. Yes,
Kitty
indeed.
with the biddies.
Kitty with the biddies. Alrighty.
We got a lot going on today.
A lot going on today. Woo! Did you see the production?
I'm looking what's going on
Did you
here.
see the production?
You gotta run that back.
You gotta run
it caught
back.
me off guard.
Caught you off
I
guard.
hear the song. I'm like, wait a minute.
Did you see the production? The production for New York gets different
Let's
when
go,
the
baby. Let's go.
championship is in order.
You're
Yes, indeed. Coming
gotta
events
have
in
the
New
yellow
York.
cap. Come on now.
Woo! Come on now.
Come on now.
What was that?
Come on now.
What was that?
We did that.
What was that?
We did that, baby.
What was that?
We
Damn
did
it.
that, baby.
What was that? Wait. I gotta go back. Let me go. Let me run it back one more time so you can be able to hear me. I just gotta play it all the way. Yeah.
Might as well run it all the way back.
All the way back. All the
Statue
way
of
back.
Liberty. This remind me of like Wayne's Brothers started.
Yes. Hit the claps for that. That touched your
Touch the soul.
That touched the soul.
They
right
hit different because we're champions.
Yes,
They hit different when you're a champion.
Drop a bomb for Bigfoot for popping in the room at the right time. Knicks for life, baby.
And my
Knicks for
boy
life.
Stu up in there.
Drop a bomb for Stu.
What it do, Stu?
Come on, Stu. Right on time, Stu. Guess what, chat? CJ the DJ is back again.
Yes, sir. Y'all favorite co-host is back, y'all.
I'm back again, but I brought somebody with us. Yeah.
Big queen, everybody.
She's back too.
The squad is back, baby.
Yes, indeed.
The squad is back.
Yes, indeed. So, today's a special day, chat. As y'all know, and y'all can see the background. New York is up. Stand the fuck up, New York. We are up. The New York Knicks are the champions, y'all.
Don't play with it. Don't play with it. Don't play with it.
Look at all the New York teams, though.
Let's go.
Woo! And there it is. Look at that. Congrats and celebrations
Congratulations, man.
to the New York Knicks championship of 2026.
2026.
The Knicks claimed their third NBA title by defeating the San Antonio Spurs in Game 5. Knicks in 5.
Knicks in 5.
I've been calling that all week.
Knicks in 5.
Knicks in 5 of the NBA Finals, a 4-1 score. snapping a 53-year championship drought. Clap it up for the goddamn New York.
53-year championship
53
drought,
years.
man.
Dirty Dan said, "Finally, I've been sick of looking at GK talking about being back." the original damn, the rest.
The original damn the rest.
Oh, okay, the original. Yeah, okay, my bad.
Your age is showing.
Yeah, age is showing. My age is showing. My eyes, the eyes.
I can't see.
Can't see that.
Yes.
I'm reading that wrong. Yeah. So Bigfoot said GK be having other people up there. Don't hit the same.
Hey, the original crew, people.
Come on, drop the bomb.
The original
Drop the
crew.
bomb for Bigfoot for noticing this.
The chemistry, it can't be broken. You know what I'm saying? This is the game lines right now.
But
This is the game.
But only when Ash is here, it's good money. It's good vibes.
Ash is part of the original crew as well.
Right, he's part of the original crew. But then Broke Nation, I gotta hit him in his head.
Yeah.
You can't beat me, Broke Nation. You can't beat me.
Can't do it. Right?
No, but that's
Man,
my.
I'm glad to have us all back.
Yeah,
together, man.
yes, indeed.
Y'all been missed.
Appreciate it. All right, let's see.
Don't hate on Ash. We ain't hating on Ash. We're giving Ash his flowers.
Yes, indeed. Well, while we on the subject of the Knicks, since we let's take a look at what New York has done.
The aftermath.
The aftermath for.
We ain't even win the game here.
No, the game was not won here in New York. It was won in San Antonio. But New York turned the fuck up last night.
It shit looked like Gotham City out
It
this bitch.
was crazy, y'all. When I say crazy,
here.
Look at all the people. BK Jeff,
Crazy
BK
crowd.
Jeff,
Like that. New York came outside.
all the way outside.
Feel sorry for the nigga who got work in the morning.
Woo!
That's all right for that.
You guys will
Nah.
call out.
You want to go outside?
Yeah,
might as well call
he
out.
outside
Go
too.
outside. Fuck it. Go work.
And this was the Knicks in the locker room after their celebrations. Before the celebrations, after the game. Oh man, look at them. They're going crazy.
Champions
They're
right
going
there.
crazy.
Them's his champions right there.
It ain't wild in there.
We done
They-
national
They going
Well deserved.
They going crazy.
Big wins. What's it like to just let it out, let it go, right, Steve?
Yeah, but nothing this big. This is the
Look
only
at that.
right.
Look at that. All
This
on the
is as
trophy.
big as
Look at
All
that.
on the trophy.
That's what you do to the Larry O'Brien trophy. Give it a shower.
That's some New York shit.
Yes, that's New York shit all day right there.
Let's go, boys. One in the
Remember,
perimeter.
Branson
Yes.
won a state championship in high
Yeah,
school,
he
too.
outside.
Damn. Shit, damn. Damn.
Bro got
yeah.
on goggles.
Yeah, the burning buses is the
They having a good time, man.
Yeah.
They having a good time.
So much love to the
Well
Knicks. So
fucking
much love to the
deserved.
Knicks. Shout outs to the Knicks, y'all. Jalen Brunson has brought them to the finals.
That's the clutch king.
Yes.
That's the clutch
Yes,
king.
brought them to the finals and took them through all the way through.
And the rest of the team was doing their thing too.
Yes, indeed.
Everybody was locked in. They was locked in.
Yeah. Hell yeah. All right. So, in lieu,
In lieu.
I know you like the words, so I said in lieu of us celebrating for the Knicks, I decided to go and get
Oh.
1800. But it's not just any old 1800. It's not just any old 1800.
Wow.
It is a New York Knicks 1800. I want to try to get the glare so you can see.
That's fighting the bottles of basketball. It's crazy.
Yes, the bottle is a basketball.
Feel it.
Oh yeah, just
It's a basketball.
yeah, man.
That's
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
That motherfucker right there.
Yeah, man. Limited.
Limited.
This is Only limited to the real rights. The real rights. But let me see. I'll cut the thing down a little bit so you have to see.
There you go.
There
There you go. Right there.
Right there.
You see that blue and orange.
Yep. Right there.
There
Much
you
better.
go.
Much better. See the Knicks right there, baby. Yes. Yes.
Kitty said, good thing it's not lemon drop.
No.
No limit drop for them. No lemon drop for them kids.
Yeah, no lemon drop for CJ. 'Cause-
Yeah. Now it's for CJ.
Yeah.
All right.
Congratulations again to New York, man.
Yep, New York stood the fuck up. So, other than New York,
Mhm.
other than the Knicks winning the NBA championships,
Mhm.
we also have National Puerto Rican Day.
Yes, shout outs to my
So,
Puerto Ricans.
Yes. So definitely shout out to the
Man, love to my
all the
Puerto Ricans, man.
Ricans.
Love y'all, motherfuckers,
Yes,
man.
indeed.
My
You're
people.
gonna be tired.
Let's bring that up. Jeff said he was out there already. Kitty said, "Yo soy boricua."
Yo soy boricua.
Yo soy boricua.
Very
Que
nice, yeah, you
viva
feel
Puerto
me?
Rico.
Big Brooklyn
Huepa.
word. All them popping out now.
Yeah,
You're gonna
yes, indeed. Look at that.
They
Look
lined
at
up.
that.
Bow, bow, bow.
Yeah, drop a bomb for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, huepas.
Huepa.
Huepas. So the National Puerto Rican Day Parade is an annual celebration held on the second Sunday in June, which is obviously today,
Mhm.
in New York City, honoring Puerto Rican culture, history, and a diaspora achievements.
Shout out.
Huepa.
Shout out to y'all, man.
Huepa. And que viva Puerto Rico. You gotta roll the R's. You gotta roll your
Yeah,
R's.
you gotta roll the R's.
Que viva Puerto Rico.
Shout out to my Puerto Ricans, man.
Kitty's out in Puerto Rico in every lifetime.
As
You should.
be, as you
As
should.
you
be.
should.
As you
You
should.
shouldn't
be.
change that. Shouldn't change that at all. All right, so what else we got? We got an interesting topic.
What we got? Something good?
I know y'all probably noticed we ain't talking about the Grim Reaper ain't out there because New York is up.
Nah, we're not burying
We're not burying nobody.
burying
New
nobody
York
today.
is
We're not doing
goddamn
that
up,
today.
so we're not going.
It's about New York. We champions.
Yeah, we champions. We can't talk about nobody dying.
You'll continue next.
And we pay homage to that.
Right.
But this is an interesting topic
Okay.
that me and you kind of briefly spoke about, but we want to bring it up to chat and let them get their thoughts on it, right?
Mhm.
So, topic is the Carmelo Anthony case. So the Carmelo Anthony case is he is a Texas teenager convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison for the April 2025 fatal stabbing of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf at a high school track meet in Frisco, Texas. Anthony, who was 17 at the time, has fled an appeal. Has filed an appeal following his trial.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of controversy between the whole case. Some are saying it was self-defense. Some are saying, put him all the way under the jail. This was racially motivated. He should have brought a knife to school.
Shouldn't have brought a knife to school, but you attacked me.
Yeah.
Right.
So story goes as Carmelo Anthony showed up to track meet practice, and Austin Metcalf and I guess a couple of other students that were there that are athletes too were there, and they was like poking their chests up at him type shit, and they was telling him like, "Nah, you can't be here. You got to get up out of here." And he was like, "I'm not going nowhere," type shit. And then it turns out they was trying to
fight,
square up with him, and he was like, "Touch me and see what happens." And if you know New York, because New York stand the fuck up. But he's from Texas, but he might have a little New York heart in him right now.
We saw what happened.
We saw what happened. He's like, y'all touched him, and y'all saw what happened. So he poked your ass up.
He told them several times, if you touch me, I'm gonna do something to you. Like he told them, shit, back off and leave me alone.
Fall back. Don't put your hands on me. You can't go put your hands on nobody, and the way they react, you want to try to put him in jail because of it.
He said, I heard so many different stories.
See, I heard the
Austin
same thing,
has
Kitty.
a twin, and they
were
were
bullies.
they
They
were
looked like it.
It was two of them. It was the two brothers. It was the two brothers that was bothering him, and they were bullies. I've heard that as well, and I've seen the pictures of two of them. So one of the ones that passed away, still R.I.P.
Yeah.
He had a twin brother.
Wow.
And it was the two of them. But my whole thing is,
he had to have a reason to bring a knife.
My whole thing is, forget color.
Yeah, forget the color.
You attack somebody, they attack back.
Right.
True.
You can't tell me how to attack back.
Right.
No.
Once you threaten my life.
Right.
Because it'll be all
you want to harm me.
Yeah, exactly.
Nah, I'm not saying.
Because he had to feel something to even want to bring a knife there. Anyway.
Again, yeah, I brought a knife
because I know so.
But you didn't know I had the knife when you attacked me.
Right.
Me having a knife is not part of the equation.
Right.
Right.
Before you
Actually
came to your
attacked me.
conclusion of attacking me.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Listen.
I agree. I'm standing 10 toes down on that whole self-defense thing and him filing the appeal for it. They've been saying celebrities have been manning together, like Cardi B and was it I forget his name too. The Boosie.
Mm-hmm.
Cardi B and Boosie are funding money into
I think Charleston White as well.
Charleston White too.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So shout out to all three of them for funding money into
Right.
Freddie, jumping bomb for Freddie for the biddies. Shout out to all of them for putting money up for him to get a proper lawyer because Carmelo Anthony couldn't afford a proper lawyer, so he had got a public defender, and that's why they feel like he got 35 years.
Supposedly too that the uncle of one of the child who passed away, like his best friend is the judge or some shit.
Yeah.
And they was just like, nah.
Right.
Yeah,
Nah.
that's
and then
crazy.
the prison that he's going to, like the uncle works there or some shit.
That's crazy.
Or another guy that's connected to them.
That be sitting at the table with him basically.
That's
That's so
it's horrible.
Nah.
That's horrible.
This needs a retrial, period.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
Period. This
Right.
needs a retrial, period. This is messy.
Yeah.
This needs a retrial.
Also,
if they had said 10 years for manslaughter, I'd have been like,
Yeah.
17.
10
It's
years.
messed up either way. Somebody's dead. It's messed up either way.
Right.
They're all kids. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
passing that you're supposed to touch somebody.
Right.
But
right,
if they
right.
had said 10 years and 3 years of probation after, I'd have been like,
Yeah, you see, but you gotta,
Hey,
because you gotta pay.
somebody's dead.
Yeah.
it's fucked up. Somebody's dead. But
Yeah.
35 years?
35 is crazy
Yeah.
work.
Nah, that's
Let me see what chat talking about.
Less. White people get less.
But that was part of the thing. They brought up many other cases where it was on the other
Right.
side.
I was like, what?
They get away with it in
Yeah.
terms of self-defense.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Let me see what chat talking about. Jeff said GTA was there in the parade. He didn't bring the championship with him, but he showed up. Okay, cool.
Oh, wow.
That's dope. Baldoni said no mention of USA steamrolling Paraguay
Yes, they
in the
did
World Cup.
in the World Cup.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Bust
Drop
ass.
a bomb.
A lot of
for-
talk's been going about that
US.
too. That the U.S. bust ass.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm all for any of the home teams
Any home team, I don't
doing
care what
their
it
thing.
is.
I just don't know soccer that much.
Me neither,
so
but
I can't.
I heard about it.
Right. So I can't call it, but I know with us living in New York, everything about the Knicks is bombing. So the U.S. team for soccer is not as big for us in New York.
No, we in the heart of New York.
Yeah, we
Like,
in the heart.
we right here.
Like
you
we
know what
can
I mean?
go to the garden
Right,
right,
we
now.
right
That
here, so
that background we
It's
can go
all
to right
blue
now.
and orange right now.
Right, everything is all blue and orange. So, but still, shout out to the USA team for soccer or
I agree
football
with-
as they call it.
Yeah, I agree with Big Brooklyn.
Right. So
2 lives were lost. Yeah, I agree.
Oh,
It's
Big
sad
Brooklyn
as fuck.
said 2 lives were lost.
It is
here.
true.
It's
Two
sad as fuck.
lives
Yeah,
or so.
for
One
sure.
is going away locked up, and one has passed away.
Yeah.
Nobody won.
Nope. Nobody wins that. Kitty said I heard so many different stories. Austin had a twin. They were bullies. That's what I'm wondering. How long was Carmelo being bullied?
That counts too.
Yes.
Maybe that's what led to me bringing the knife.
Yes.
Like you were saying.
Exactly.
Yep. And Retro said the whole thing was crazy. Of course. Rose City said 35 years does feel harsh. It is.
It is harsh.
10 years is like, God
10
damn,
years is a
You gotta
bite.
get something.
To a point, it's like,
You can't
somebody's murdered here.
Right.
you're right. You get what I'm saying?
But it kills me with that because there was somebody that it was a scenario just the same, opposite. The
Mhm.
black kid got killed and the white kid survived it,
They got away.
and they got like 5 years. I couldn't get pull up the names and stuff properly, but I remember seeing it before, and I was like, "What the hell was their name?" I can't remember.
It's a Commonwealth state, so they're gonna give.
Yeah, Texas is
They're
a
trying to make an
Commonwealth state.
example out of it, is what they're trying to do.
Right, Texas is a Commonwealth state, so they just gonna run them numbers up the way they feel like it.
Yeah, basically.
And then with them being, low key friends or knowing each other or whatever,
It's over for you.
yeah, it's just gonna run that shit up on you. So it's bad both ways for
It
them.
needs a retrial period.
It does. I
Period.
I did see that they whatever his bail was $2 million or something, but then they dropped it down to like $250K.
Mhm. That's a big drop.
It's a big drop. So it's
why
like
was it $2 million to begin with?
right,
Right.
they dropped it down
If you
because
could drop
of
it
the
way
judge
down to
seeing it.
250K, nigga, that's kind of crazy drop.
Yeah. So
Shit's ridiculous.
Yep,
This needs a
2
retrial
lives
any
was-
which way you
yeah,
want to put it.
is.
Period.
it does.
Facebook broke it.
Period.
It does.
Said 2 lives was
Two
lost
there,
here.
2 lives were
He said
lost
it
here.
for years.
That's the thing with cases like when one get locked up and one is gone, they're both gone.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, so great combos, chat. Let's go, New York.
Chipotle said, speaking of trials.
Speaking of trials,
Speaking of trials, though,
we let's get into the meat and potatoes of things, people.
get into the meat and potatoes of things.
First of all, we got our girl Foxy coming up to the show next week.
yes, indeed, Foxy.
We got our show. Foxy got something she want to say.
Yes, yes,
It's on the
yes. It's on the Discord.
Mm,
No,
on
no,
the
it's on
drive, yeah.
the drive. Yeah,
it says Foxy, I think.
cool.
Should be no further up. It's one of the
That
top
one?
ones.
That one there. Because I had added
Okay. Whichever one is further up top.
the one that says that one Lasso.
No. Is whichever one is further up top that says Foxy.
Okay, I'll bring it up top here as you can see.
Yeah, Miss Foxy Trevor. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay, cool.
We're gonna listen to Miss Foxy, and then
Yeah.
we're gonna get into some proceedings
Right.
in lieu.
In lieu,
yeah,
in lieu of.
Excuse me, but you bought the 1800 and we ain't doing nothing with it.
Oh yeah, yeah. We brought it
You
here,
know, we just over here, you know.
and yeah,
That
that's.
took me 9 months, damn it. Put me up.
Yeah.
Oh, it took her 9 months. Goddamn, my bad.
What we doing?
My
right
bad. Let's get into the real game lounge swing of things, right? Goddamn New York. Touch the basketball, goddamn it. Touch the basketball. Clap it up.
Man. And just let me just chat a little bit. Today's also the first day of the new segment.
Yes.
Where we're gonna vote on clip of the week.
Clip of the week.
So we're gonna watch
All
about
of
10
you
clips,
guys.
and there's a whole bunch of them that you guys sent
Yes.
from you guys. So we're gonna sit here, we're gonna watch them, the new segment, and let's see who wins clip of the week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see who's gonna win the
Yeah,
first
me
clip of the
too.
week. Cause there's a few of them in there.
It's a big title. To be the first.
The first.
With some strawberry lemonade.
Mhm, orange.
Yep.
The orange color, a little orangey. Take it, sure.
Uh-huh. Crack that. Pour yourselves up your own drink too for New York. Come on now.
Right.
Yeah, give it to her. Pour yourselves
Everything
up.
will be for New York.
Mhm.
Everything for New York. Everything for New York.
Breathe for New York.
Right.
Blink
Bring
for New
New
York.
York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eat for New
Everything
York. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
everything for New York. Today is about New York, goddammit. Today-
Koja, Representative GK, I hope you're ready. Because he has to call in these claims.
Yes.
We're also dropping Kitty's charges today.
Oh, okay.
And trial will take place also next week.
Next week, okay.
But here's what sweetens the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Foxy is also representing Kitty.
Mm.
Nice.
Fox,
Oh,
I sense
yeah.
bias. Wait, hold
Nice.
on. Now. Koja, you taking notes? There's a collusion going on here. We ain't even dropped the charges yet.
I'm
And you
saying.
chose sides already?
I'm saying.
That's crazy. Where's Koja?
I'm saying.
Koja said absolutely yes.
I'm a girl's girl.
Yeah, you are.
She's
what?
a girl's girl,
That's
goddammit.
crazy. This is gonna be some beef next week.
I'm not here
So
for
right
that.
after we listen to what Foxy got to say to us, we'll tap in with the lawyers. We got some things to do today.
Yes. Oh, we got another raid coming
Who
through.
coming in with the raid?
That's Gluttony with
That's
the raid.
right on time.
Right on time.
Right on
Goddammit. Drop a bomb for Gluttony with the raid.
Welcome in, Raiders.
Clap it up for our guy Gluttony.
Welcome in. Shout out to Gluttony Kitty. Can I get a shout out to Gluttony, please?
Yes,
Everybody
indeed.
from the raid.
And being that y'all just popped in, we talk about clip of the week. But let's go back.
Let's go back.
Let's go back a little bit because New York is up, goddammit. New York got fucking New York Knicks is up, and we doing the goddamn thing. You hear
Yes,
that? You hear
yes,
that right there?
yes.
It is crazy.
We gotta
So
keep that. I like
shout
that.
out to
I
Gluttony.
like that. We're gonna keep that.
Yeah, we keeping
gonna
that.
keep
We
that. That's
keeping
gonna
that.
stay.
That's gotta
That's gonna
stay.
stay.
We champions.
They
now.
got-
Yeah.
We champs now. You
Yeah.
gotta, I'm saying. But shout out to y'all.
Welcome to
Raiders.
the Game Lounge, everybody. We got a couple of things to get into right now. We got a guest coming in next week. She about to say something to us,
Yes.
and then Kitty's going on trial next week as well.
Yes. Our girl Kitty Tat.
And we're gonna get the lawyer Koja on the phone,
and all that.
and he's gonna drop the charges. And Kitty's trial will be next week.
Yeah.
And our special guest is also Kitty's lawyer.
Mhm.
So this is gonna get interesting.
Yes.
So let's listen to our girl Foxy and see what she got to say to us. This is our. She gonna sit down with GK for a little interview
Yep.
next week. Don't miss it.
Don't miss it.
Hey everybody, it's your girl Foxy Cat. I'm excited to announce that I've been invited as a guest on the Game Lounge. They don't know what they're getting themselves into, but I'm excited to be there. You will find me and the rest of the Game Lounge crew on Sunday, June 21st, 6 p.m. You want to pull up to twitch.tv/Golden Crust 200 and you will find all of our shenanigans. It's going to be fun, it's going to be laughter, and maybe a little spicy drama. So you definitely don't want to miss it. Again, Sunday, June 21st, 6 p.m. Twitch.tv/Golden Crust 200. I'll see y'all then.
You can't say you don't know where it is.
Come on now.
You can't say you don't know where it is. She spelled it out for
Come
Mom.
on, goddamn.
And that background was lit.
Come on, Foxy.
Oh, what we mean by drop charges, I think there's a mistake with it's release.
Yes.
Tell you guys what her charges are for court next week.
Yeah.
She ain't getting off the hook.
No.
Kitty gonna be the first one we lock up.
Make sure y'all use proper terminology.
But
What you
y'all want to
doing?
see her guilty so bad.
What you doing? We didn't even get to court yet.
But you already
You
said she
Matlock
guilty.
sister?
You already said she guilty.
I'm the one that's pressing the charges, goddammit.
Well, Kitty has retained me as her
She's
attorney.
retaining you as shit. She's retaining you as shit. What are you talking about? This is all kind of treason, this nigga doing. Motherfucker, you work here. The fuck? Nigga, you work here.
I will act
No,
on the
no,
as the liaison.
no, she got Foxy. Shut up. Press the button, nigga. That's it. Yes.
Yo, y'all so stupid with that.
Nigga works here.
Koza will be defending against Kitty.
Foxy.
Koza, attorney at law Esquire.
Koza and Koza.
Koza and Koza. Esquire.
Yeah.
Dirty Dan said CJ left like Jared Leto Joker.
Oh man. We gonna choke Gluttony talking about the Knicks still suck.
All I need is the grills, right? There's the
With the little ha, right?
right.
No, you gonna be following.
Yeah,
Wait.
I
He
mean,
said, whose side
I
you
don't think
on?
I'm
Wait a
slimming
minute.
enough.
What did Holly say? He said Koza Esquire is undefeated. It is.
Oh, okay.
It is.
Okay. That's a strong claim there.
That is a strong claim. So, is the lawyer ready? Koza, are you ready to tap in? You gonna put it up here or you put it on the phone?
Yeah, I pull up here. That's fine. We gotta let him give us a call.
Yeah.
And then I'll switch
Tap
it
in
over.
with us, Koz. There we go.
There it goes.
There we go.
Okay, hold on.
Hold on, everybody.
Game
Yo, can you guys hear
Koza.
him? Chat, can you guys hear the lawyer?
Echo.
He said echo.
It might be echo. Oh shit. Okay. Maybe you gotta turn it down some. Damn. I don't know how to turn it down some. Hold on. Oh, wait, turn.
You might be able to turn Discord down directly.
Wait, hold
and
on.
also coming through on the display capture.
The one on Discord. In Discord.
This is in Discord.
You can turn down from there. So you say input.
Output to Windows default. Is it Windows default? I think so.
Right.
All right. Coz, you can hear us? Oh, we can't hear him though.
We
Damn.
can't hear him, yeah.
Okay. It went. I put it back just now. I don't know how to get the echo.
Go ahead and go into OBS.
Can you hear us?
He said go to OBS.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it still echoing?
Is it still echoing?
Is it still echoing, chat?
Are we getting an echo? Test,
Kitty said
test.
yes.
All right, yeah. So go into OBS.
Okay.
Mute the Discord in the soundbar in the audio mixer.
Oh, okay. Okay. The
And then I
Discord
should
screen. Okay.
Yeah, the scene. Yeah, and then I should be able to. They should still be able to hear me from the display capture.
Okay.
Are we good, chat?
Let me see.
Yo, Zamo, what's good?
Can y'all hear him now?
Can you guys hear him, chat?
We good? Now he's far away.
Should be better than he turned it up, right?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear him? Say something, Coles.
Testing.
Dirty
Gucci.
Dad said Gucci. Okay.
All right, there we go.
Okay, so we got the lawyer.
All right.
We got the lawyer on the mic right now, and Koza. So Koza's
Yes.
is gonna release the. Go ahead, Koza. You tell him, because I'm gonna be using the wrong legal terms and shit. He's defending me and locking Kitty ass up. Go ahead, Koza. Talk to him.
All right. So what we're dealing with here is the Game Lounge versus Kitty KT Tat. We are the Game Lounge, in conjunction with the offices of Koza and Koza, are seeking justice for Golden GK Crust after the defendant, Kitty KT Tat, refused GK his preferred hairstyle while moving to her island in Tamagotchi life and has been accused of abusing her mod powers. So I will read the charges that we are that we are seeking to
Listen up, chat.
Proceed with. Count 1 will be unlawful suppression of digital hairstyles in the first degree. The defendant did knowingly and willfully deny the plaintiff access to a braided hairstyle on a customizable character, therefore infringing upon the plaintiff's constitutional right to self-expression, drip, and aesthetic excellence.
Goddamn.
Count two will be abuse of the Twitch moderator authority. The defendant, while acting under the color of Twitch moderation powers, did engage in excessive and tyrannical use of mod privileges.
God damn.
Excuse me, Koza.
Unjustified timeouts, selective enforcement of chat law, and the weaponization of moderation tools.
Oof.
This is in direct violation of the Game Lounge Penal Code number 420. Three, we have crimes against the vibes. The defendant did knowingly disrupt the peace, morale, or comedic harmony of the community through acts of unnecessary hostility, fun suppression, and general misconduct unbecoming of a Tamagotchi island owner.
Jesus
Christ. We have count 4, which is premeditated follicular oppression. The defendant intentionally prevented GK from achieving the hairstyle vision necessary to fully realize his created character, causing emotional damage, reduced aura, and a
reduced aura is crazy.
Full violation of Article 4 of the Digital Drip Protection Act.
Oh my God.
Yo, what is going on here?
Well,
count 5 is conspiracy to commit hater behavior.
Look at the training.
The defendant maliciously conspired to diminish the plaintiff's enjoyment through coordinated acts of negativity, resistance, and anti-braid sentiment. Right now, the prosecution is seeking maximum sentencing, including public ridicule in the form of a good old point and laugh. Apology to the braid community and a 10-second, I repeat, a 10-second timeout. Again, I am Koza with the offices of Koza and Koza Esquire Incorporated LLC Industries.
Clap it up for Koza, man.
Oh my God.
Drop a bomb for Koza for that.
Lawyers?
No, Koza will get a bomb. He gets a bomb, but he also gets a... He gets a New York. That was crazy, bro.
I appreciate that.
Oh my God.
That's coming from my lawyer guy. I'm not allowed to speak too much about the case.
Yeah.
So my lawyer said so. My lawyer will be here next week, Sunday.
He doesn't look indestructible to me.
So Koza, thank you for tapping in with the lounge. Anything else you want to say?
Hey man, CJ Monet, it's great to have you back.
Yes,
Take
indeed.
care of my nephew, y'all.
Yes, of course.
And I'm gonna catch y'all next week.
All
yes,
right,
sir.
bro.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Give it up for Koza, y'all. Give it up for Koza.
Money well spent, goddammit. Money well spent, goddammit. He said, infrastructure. What?
The vernacular and all of that shit's.
Oh, man. So, you guys tune in next week for the full court case after the interview.
Oh, my God.
It's
And
going
CJ
down right
didn't-
here.
Fossey's not here to defend her, and CJ didn't prepare a...
Hey,
defend
you
that
got all week to clip that and send it to her.
Oh, my God. Jesus Christ.
He said Kitty got a public defender.
No, she don't.
At this point, I feel like a public defender after the shit he said. Listen, Kitty, I'm put it this way. You going to jail. But I'm I want to get you less sentence. That's the whole point.
Crazy. Nigga said you going to jail. They have no faith. They have no faith.
Did you hear the man?
I want to get her a less sentence. I want to get her with at least maybe
he just keep
community
call
service.
Saul.
I want to get her with a community service or at least a stream. She got to do a week of a stream or a month of a stream wearing something.
Hey, listen,
funny something.
There is some charges in there that's some punishment that will be added.
Oh my God!
Some more amazing punishment.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna keep the good old point and laugh must stay.
The good old point and laugh.
The point and laugh is hilarious. The point and laugh is hilarious.
Oh God!
Oh my God!
Oh God! We're gonna have a judge in the building.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, anyway, let's. What time is it?
Oh my God!
It's 7 o'clock.
7
It's
o'clock.
time that we roll into.
Yep, time for us to get started with our
New
clip
segment
of the week.
Let me get a New York for that.
segment. Clap it up for the clip of the week, and we're gonna get a New York for it.
So, welcome in. Thank y'all for being here. For those of y'all who put up some clips, we're gonna watch like how many of them.
We can only try for 10, but I mean, I because I want to do put it inside of the poll and everything for everybody to be able to.
Okay, so
put
we're
their
gonna watch
votes
a
in.
few of them.
But I think we could do watch 5 with a poll.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
try
so
to
what
do
we're
it.
gonna do is all the clips that you guys watch.
Mhm.
At the end of the clips, we're gonna vote on clip of the week.
Yes.
And this is the first time we're doing this segment. We've been talking about it for a while. So we're gonna
Yes.
launch it today.
Yes.
So vote on clip of the week and figure out some kind of prize. I'll maybe do like a gift sub to the channel or whoever wins something like that. You're gonna get big shout outs and we're gonna put you up there. Everybody gonna come to your channel and see what's up.
Right. All right. So with that being said, Kitty is not in jail, so
She's free right now.
she's free now, and I don't. This should be a way for her to move in the direction of having some leniency from said charges that were brought
We're not
against
doing
her.
court right now. This is
I'm
court
just saying. This
My
is
lawyer's not
this
here.
He's in chat.
No.
He's in
no.
chat.
Clip of the week.
It's clip of the week. This is going to be a motion that we're filing in lieu of
In lieu.
good faith and to her
I
character.
tell you what. Talk to the lawyer about that.
Right. Coles is listening.
Foxy's her lawyer. Who the fuck are you? Who is this nigga? Nigga, you work here. I get it. This nigga work here.
I'm just saying
You set this shit up.
she retained me. I'm just saying.
You're not retained, sir.
Damn it. Okay. I guess Foxy.
All right, let's launch
Sorry,
clip of the
Kitty.
week. We're gonna try always do clip of the week by 7,
Okay.
so everybody know what time to,
Yeah.
to
Every
tune
day,
in for clip of the
7
week.
o'clock.
7 o'clock, and we're still fine tuning the segment. We might do it twice a week,
Right.
or every week, depending on the stock.
Right.
So this is the first one. We're still working it out.
Yes.
Right. So we're gonna try to shoot for about 7, so we can get past the announcements and things like that, and
Yes.
whatever CJ got lined up for us, because that's his run. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
So let's get into
So
it.
let's get into it.
This
Let's
is the
see.
first clip.
First clip is from our girl Kitty Tat.
All
It's
right.
called BB Latinas. And
BB Latina.
and it's also National Puerto Rican Day, so this is perfect. This is perfect.
That is perfect.
Don Tree said, "Nah, his reading them charges should be submitted for clip of the week."
Yo,
It
facts.
should.
Facts.
It should.
We got a clip.
It definitely should. I love you, Kitty, but that was some shit.
Nah, that was well done.
Right.
All right, let's go. First clip.
First clip, Kitty Tat.
Can they hear it?
Hold on.
The bottom chat.
Talking about big booty Latinas.
What?
Question for you.
That's Father Glut.
You can choose between big booty Latinas and Sonic the Hedgehog. What do you do?
Her laughing in the background is making it more funny.
I guess I'd pick.
What he gonna pick?
Big
Big
booty
booty Latinas, nigga. What?
Big booty Latina.
Really? Well, if that's the case, we're gonna get
Everybody like big
along
booty
just
Latinas.
fine.
They boys now. They locked in.
Let's
Oh
be
my
They
God.
locked in.
Holy shit!
Coincidentally, this is actually the game that the charges are brought up against.
Oh my God.
Those are all. She created that world with all of us.
So that should also count towards the fact of her bringing big booty Latinas to the organization and the
The
environment.
organization.
The
I keep
organization.
telling you,
Yeah.
nigga, you work here. Fired. That was our first clip. Shout out to Kitty. Yeah, he's not gonna be here next week.
Damn, that's fucked
Ash,
up.
call me.
Damn.
Might got a spot for you. I don't know.
That's fucked up. That is so fucked up.
Bad Bunny said her laugh with the echo.
Oh,
that shit made it more
Fox-
funny.
Foxy Cat
Foxy,
arrived.
we was just talking about you,
Drop a
girl.
bomb for Foxy. And New York is up to date, Foxy. New York
Welcome
is all
in,
the way
Foxy.
the fuck up.
Hey,
Drop a
everybody.
goddamn bomb for
That's our
Foxy.
you got to talk to Kitty and learn what the charges are. We just dropped the charges very elegantly.
Yeah,
Might
Foxy,
I-
they was trying to do her dirty.
Yeah.
This nigga here.
Yeah.
I don't care.
What's the second clip?
Second clip
So,
is
just to fill you again, in fact, we just started the clip of the week,
yeah.
and Kitty's first clip was the actual first clip ever.
Yes. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna try to do a small poll while we through every video we're going through. Just add the name. So the next clip is Super Hot Fire
Super
from
Hot
our
Fire.
guy Koza and Koza
Esquire.
Esquire. But he's Detroit Koza.
Detroit Koza.
This is Detroit
This-
Koza.
Wait, hold on. Super Hot Fire. What is going on with Koza?
Super Hot Fire. Cause Super Hot Fire knocked out Ray J, so this might be crazy.
This might grow to be my favorite segment.
Yeah, oh yeah, might be. Let's see.
No. Clashing your weapon with another man's weapon? Nah, son.
Fire.
Fire. Super hot fire.
Fire.
Fire for that.
Fire.
Fire for that.
Fire.
Fire for that.
We ain't sword
We
fighting.
dodge that shit. Talk
Sword
about
fighting is
skirt.
crazy.
We're not sword
I
fighting,
ain't
bro.
talking about no.
That's
Clashing
crazy. Fire.
weapons.
Y'all can't do nothing. Y'all make yourself
Nope.
can't
Yeah.
do nothing.
Nope. That's almost up there with backstabbing. That's almost up there with backstabbing. We don't do that. We
That
dodge.
is madness.
He said we
He's
dodge.
sword fight now. Right. Tell him,
Don't
GK.
dodge it out.
We ain't doing all
We're not
that.
clashing weapons, man.
Oh my god. What if it accidentally happened?
How you accidentally clash swords? I don't.
He was going for your legs and you put your
Get
shit
the
there.
fuck out
You
of here!
blocked your leg with the damn sword.
That is crazy.
Yo,
was
super
a
hot
funny one.
fire, Koza. That was good.
Stupid.
Ah. Oh, okay.
Okay, so we got Super Hot Fire from our guy Koza, and
BBL with Kitty.
BBL with Kitty. And
This from my man.
this is from Koza.
Cliff C. Cliff C.
Cliff. This is Cliff. Okay, Cliff C. 718. Drop a bomb for Cliff. He's
Yes,
not here
sir.
right now, but drop a bomb for
Drop
Cliff.
a ball for
The
Cliff.
Godfather. Let's get into that. Let me open that up. Okay.
Okay, what's going on here with Cliff now?
Woo!
And I killed myself.
He got mad how you just died. This is getting on my nerves. I would have been sick. I'm like, bro, get this shit out of here.
I gotta turn that shit off. Oh my god.
Okay.
Got Big Brooklyn.
Big Brooklyn. Big
Yes,
Brooklyn.
sir. Shout out to my guy,
Shout
Big
out to
Brooklyn.
Big Brooklyn. Drop a bomb for Big Brooklyn. Oh wait, never missed a post for Big Brooklyn. This is on Instagram.
Oh, that's all. You got something.
you're
Check the
not-
next one to see if you actually put the actual video up after it.
Yeah. Okay.
there it is.
Yeah.
It's on TikTok.
Okay. Yeah. Hit the X boom, and then there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Whew. All right, let's open that up.
Let's see what Big Brooklyn got.
What about,
Oh, this shit is hilarious.
Okay. Oh my
Oh,
God.
he cooking. Oh,
Oh.
no way.
The drop
Oh
kick.
my! Watch it!
Oh my God.
Not the rock bottom.
Damn.
Oh, that was sick.
The slam.
That was sick.
The slams.
I almost want to say run that back. That shit was crazy. That's well edited too.
So
That was well edited.
it was.
That was. I like that.
We're gonna call that Big Brooklyn Love Me. Love Me.
Kitty said run it back.
Yeah, let me run that one back.
That's our first replay request.
That's the first replay.
That's our first replay request.
That was the first replay. Let's see.
That shit was tough though. Nyang, nigga. He killed that man.
Yes.
Not the stove.
Oh my god. The drop kick.
He died.
Oh my god.
He's not walking again. He's done.
The rock bottom. Hold that. Elbow drop. Hold that.
Just disgusted.
Yeah,
you dead. You dead. You
it's
dead.
over.
You passed away.
Yes.
R.I.P. to that guy.
Yes.
It's over for him.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Clap it up for Big Brooklyn.
That was a good one.
That's a solid one.
That was a solid one.
That's a solid one.
That's our first replay as well. Damn. It's going pretty well.
Big Brooklyn has 2. Oh, this one
That's
failed.
probably why you put the other ones up.
Okay. So this is Koza
again.
Koza again. So let me see. Maybe this one does work. Oh, it does work.
Okay, there we go. Another one from Big Brooklyn.
Another one for Big Brooklyn.
Look where you at tonight, got no alibi. I was all alone with the love of my life. She's got glitter for skin, my radiant beat in the night. I don't even
Yo, they really fighting.
see you shine. It's your
Now, long took me to beat that boss.
Yes, nigga here. And defeated.
And defeated. Freaky ass
Drop-
nigga here.
drop-
69. That was funny.
Let's see.
But Bozo. Hey yo.
Yo. Damn.
That nigga turned his head up too.
Oh my god. Make sure you see it going down. Yeah. Make sure you see it going down. Okay. Okay, so all right. So Koza,
we got Brooklyn Jeff. We got one from Brooklyn Jeff.
One from Brooklyn Jeff. Okay, so that
we got going order though.
Yeah, let me hit the Koza. What the fuck is that?
I hope they have like other Leviathans too. Oh shit. What? This section of the world is under development. Oh, my bad.
Oh no.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
What is that?
What the fuck is that?
Nigga went up top real quick.
Yo, what was that tail? Yo, okay.
Oh man.
I'm invested.
I don't know what the fuck that was. I ain't
Nah,
seen
I
that
gotta
yet.
run that back.
Oh my god, Leviathans too. Oh shit. What? This section of the world is under development. Oh my bad.
He
my bad.
almost crossed to the fourth wall.
Yeah.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Crazy shit right there.
What the fuck is that?
Let me go back a little bit so just in case y'all
The
missed
fuck
it,
is that?
So I can save it on the right
What the
side.
fuck?
Hold on.
Yeah, right there.
This shit right here, y'all. This shit right here.
Some sort of mystery creature.
What the fuck is that? That creature is being created.
Yeah.
That creature is being created right when he was playing it on the fourth floor.
That shit said you can't go no further,
And
bro.
it's like, you can't come past here. We still working.
We still editing
you,
shit,
you
bro.
You see this shit? This shit gonna bite your head off. Damn.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Damn.
What the fuck is that?
Yo, what was that tail? Yo, okay. I don't know what the fuck that was. I ain't seen that yet.
Koza, did you ever find out what the fuck that was?
Yeah, for real.
Right.
That's just the Kraken.
Yeah, that's some crazy shit right there.
I actually got invested. Like I thought it was gonna pop out or some shit.
Yeah,
Right.
just gonna swim back and just bite Cole's whole face.
Yeah,
off. Let's get his ass.
We got one from Brooklyn Jeff.
Let me see what Cole. If Cole even say he seen what it was. No, he didn't say.
Did he say? I think he did.
The creature's under development. Created in real time. So yep. Okay, Brooklyn Jeff. Our guy Brooklyn Jeff. Got a video. Hold on. This is
Some 2K, okay.
Some 2K. Block machine. Bop.
Fuck out of here.
Bop.
Fuck out of here.
Let me begin.
Bop.
Fighting the wind, battle methods is sin. I won't ever slack up. Pookie better back up. Try and play the role and you're the whole crew will act up. Get up, stand up, come on, throw your hands up if you got the feeling. Jump up, touch the ceiling. Monks, let's up on flow. Someone's talking junk, yeah, I'll bust them in the eye. And then I'll take the punks out. Feeling
Swatted that one.
amps in a trunk and I got more rhymes than this cops at a junkie. Don't let
That's what I
show enough. I got pop
Not
from
this
the
house.
kids on the hill with my mom and my
No.
I came to get down. So get down your seat and jump around. Jump around.
That's embarrassing.
Jump
You did
around.
that in one game?
One game.
Jump around.
Damn. The bo- oh, he tripped
Jump
off.
and get down. Jump, jump, jump. Everybody jump, jump,
Damn. Let that right. Then locker room.
I'll serve your ass like John McEnroe. If your girl steps
No
up,
way.
I'm smacking the hoe. Word to your moms, I came to drop bombs. I got more rhymes and the bottle's got songs. And just like the prodigal son,
Oh my
I
God.
return. Anyone stepping on me, you'll get burned. Cause I
That's
got
what I did.
there.
Program from over there, bro.
Come to battle with a shotgun. But if you think you're a fool,
Bro,
cause
finish
I
the
do
dunk
to
with
the
no
death.
ball.
Trying
Yeah.
to step to me, you take your last breath. I got the
That's
skill.
what I did.
Come get your fill. Cause when I shoot the gift, I shoot the kill.
Remind me
I came
to
get
never
down.
play you
I
with
came to
2K.
get down. So get out your seat and jump around.
Damn.
Jump around. Jump
Jump
around.
around.
My man got one motive out there. Block everything. He got one motive. That was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
That's
Who
six,
hit the
right?
year? Oh, Cammy player. Our guy Cammy player.
Cammy player.
Cammy had a good time, bro. We doing clip of the week, and that was just BK Jeff's video of what we gonna call that?
Foxy said this malarkey ends soon. He's talking about the case.
Damn.
Yes.
Damn.
I don't care.
I know treason when I smell it. See you too? See you keep forgetting you work here. And you over here already got your vote ready.
Damn.
You heard what Koja said. You heard that articulate
Right, he went in.
speech. That was a good one from Brooklyn Jeff right there. Want to do a few more?
I'm trying to see if I can add more to the list of the polls. I can't add no more. They won't let me add.
I got my favorite already. What's after this one?
This one. It's another BK Jeff one.
Oh, what's this? What's going on?
Tiana, Khadijah, Lenny Carvel, him, her, bodies.
Say body up. If looks get killed, then my style might body up. Body up. Body up. If looks get killed, then my style might body up. Body up. If looks get killed, then my style might body up. Shout out to the groupies. Shout out to my ex.
Damn. You really are a 2K crackhead, bro.
Yeah.
You really are a 2K crackhead.
Yeah, give it up to
Them
2K.
shits is clean.
Yeah.
What's after that? I feel like seeing that.
Galaxy Storms is in here.
Galaxy.
She made it. Jump a bomb for Galaxy Storms.
Yeah, nah.
And for Galaxy, because Galaxy's here, she get a New York too.
New York.
All day.
All
day.
All day.
See what's next.
All right. Oh, BK
Another
Jeff.
Brooklyn Jeff.
Another BK Jeff. All right. Let's see. Another 2K video. God damn. This is probably they get the ankles broken.
Somebody ankle got broken.
Last time people make some noise. Get him, Jay. Who you know fresher than hoe? Riddle me that. The rest of y'all know where I'm lyrically at. Can't none of y'all mirror me back. Yeah, hear me rappers like Hand G rapping in prime. Young H.O. raps great today. About to take over the globe. Now break bread. I'm in Boeing Jets. Global Express. Out the country, but the blueberry still connect. I'm on the low, but the yacht got a triple deck. But when you young, what the freak of respect? Yeah. Grand opening, grand closing. Goddamn your manhole. Crack the can, open the can. Who you gonna find open in hand with no pen? Just draw inspiration. Soon you gonna see you can't replace him with cheap imitations. Yeah. Do you want more? Cook and roll with the
that shit out of here.
Jeff's out here balling on niggas.
Yes, sir. Get through this, spin, move, and come around. Damn it.
After me, there should be no more. So for one last time, let me make some noise.
Going back up there and hand it over.
Posterize.
Look what you made me do. Look what I made for you. Knew I would pay my dues. How will they pay you? When you first come in the game, they try to play you. Then you drop a couple of hits. Look how they wait to you. From Marcy to Madison Square, to only thing that matters is just a matter of years. Baby, having J status appears to be at an all-time high. Perfect time to say goodbye. Back like Jordan, we in the 1-5. It ain't to play games with you. It's the
back and watch the shot.
you. If I'm blowing you to smithereens, let's have to take one for your team. I need you to remember one thing. I came, I saw, I conquer. From record sales, sold out concerts. So long, you want this encore. I need you to scream till your lungs get sore.
Yo, what's happening to these niggas out here? What's the defense on Jeff?
Going right up there and now. I'm not going nowhere. There's one. I don't even go up there. Check this one. Now. Everyone in the corner. Damn it.
God damn.
Everyone
They can't guard this nigga.
Everyone in the goddamn corner. This nigga's crazy.
All right. You want to leave it here?
Yep, we can leave it right here.
So next week,
Let me
we'll
see.
start that from
1,
here.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
We did 9.
We did 9. And we ended it off on BK Jeff with the bow.
Yeah, right there, right
we
there.
gonna call that bow.
All right, so clap it up. Let us know how you feel about this segment, y'all. How y'all feel about it?
Yes. Yeah. I like this.
And just to let y'all can send in all types of videos.
Right.
Gaming clips, IRL clips, funny shit. Just as long as it's from y'all.
Yep.
So
I'm putting the poll up right now.
I waited a month for my shit to not even get played.
Damn.
It's only the first episode.
It's the first segment. We're gonna continue next time.
Let me see how far down his is. Okay, Big Brooklyn's is there again, and then Big Brooklyn's again, and then Big Brooklyn again, Big Brooklyn again. And then this it's all right.
Yeah.
All right, you see too much. Goddamn, you see too much. All right.
We're gonna get to it.
Yeah, we're gonna get to it.
Tune it out next week.
Yep.
And run another segment next week.
Yeah, we run the next. Y'all should pick one vid from each person. So I'm gonna put a poll up for
Yeah,
y'all.
we still yeah.
Still taking ideas.
Super hot fire and
Yeah, Dirty Dan. I feel you. We still working out the kinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes sense though.
Okay. Cool. I'm gonna start a poll, chat. Here's the poll. I put it's 5 different people. It's Kitty, BB, Big Booty Latinas, Koza Super High Fire, Cliff C with the Mario, Big Brooklyn with the Love Me, and BK Jeff with the 2K clips. Well,
that makes sense. Just BK Jeff 2K clips.
2K clips.
Right.
Yeah.
If your favorite is one of his clips, then just vote for him.
Yeah. All right,
Big
so
Love Me was my favorite one.
They
I ain't
go.
gonna lie.
Yeah.
It was Love Me from it.
Love was good. But
It's Love Me. It's Love Me for my number 1. Super Hot Fire was a close second. Super Hot Fire.
For me,
Super Hot Fire was hilarious.
For me, it probably was the 2K clips. I was like, what the fuck? Damn.
Yeah, he was cooking out there.
Damn. Got him.
Oh, and just in case, y'all, just press !Discord to add you guys clips.
Yep.
You go down to the section that says Game Lounge, and you just see Clip of the Week. You just add your clips right there.
Yep. You guys make sure you guys are voting. The poll is up. Make sure you guys are voting. Less than a minute to vote. And we got a couple things, and the Big Booty Latinas is hilarious. So Kitty is too funny.
Big Booty Latinas.
In the meantime, between time,
BBTs.
Vote on your phone too. I voted on my phone too. Just so you could all just be added. You know what I'm saying? Goodbye. Let's get this first vote. I'm curious to see who's gonna win.
All right, Big Brooklyn, love me, love me.
That's the winner?
That's the winner.
Ah, shit.
That is the
Shout
winner.
out to my guy, Big Brooklyn.
Yes, indeed.
You got the first win.
The first W. Let's go. I'll put it back. Yeah.
Shout out to my guy, Big Brooklyn. Kitty, can I get a shout out to Big Brooklyn?
Yes, indeed. Oh shit! I pressed the wrong button right there.
First game now wins.
First segment win, man. First game line win. Let's go. Yes. Kitty came in second.
With the big booty Latinas.
Kitty came in second.
Yep.
Yo, hey, Big Brooklyn, I appreciate you, man, sending in clips and supporting the segment and all that. All of you guys who did, and you know, there's still more.
Yeah.
But we appreciate all you guys. Like I said, exclamation Discord. Just go right over there where it says Game Lounge. You'll see where it says clips.
Yep.
Clip of the week. You add your clips there, and we're good to go. All right, you ready for some shit?
Yep. Let's get into it.
Let's do some fusion. You got something up there?
No.
Oh, let's do some fusion.
Ooh, fusion. Go back.
That's another one too.
You see what your little brain been up to since I've
Hey,
been
listen, this fusion was cool as shit. All right, chat. So again, first time we did the segment.
Why does it keep doing that?
Let us know how you guys feel about it, and we're gonna run it again next week.
Yep. I liked it. That was cool.
It was cool. And again, all types of clips you guys can send in.
Yeah.
Yep. Doesn't have to be game clips. Could be
Any kind of clips. Just as long as it's
IRL
from
clips.
just as long as it's from y'all.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? As long as it's from y'all. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So let's get into some fusion.
Yep.
Let's have a good time.
Let's do it.
Oh, Blackbird said who won? Big Brooklyn won the first one.
Yep.
Big Brooklyn is our champion.
Big Brooklyn got it. He said, "Yes, sir."
Hey,
Yeah,
Brooklyn,
you already
York?
know.
You gotta hit the New York thing.
Yeah. Gotta hit New York.
Big Brooklyn, I'm gonna drop a gift sub for one of your compatriots in your chat.
Yeah, drop the bomb for Big Brooklyn. Hit him with one more New York.
And make sure all y'all go follow Big Brooklyn and check Big Brooklyn out, man.
Yes, everyone gets appreciation for it.
Yes,
everyone gets appreciation for their clips. Of course, all the clips was fire.
Katie Koza,
yup, Cliff,
and BK Jeff.
And BK Jeff. Appreciate all of y'all.
For sure. And we got more to come.
We're gonna be doing this new segment, y'all.
All right, so here is fusion. Let's do it.
It's really easy. It was just 2 clips. That's what we came out so good.
Okay. Wagwan Yardy.
See the fusion.
Ooh. Fancy.
That's it?
That's the fusion.
Peach and apple?
Oh, let's explain what fusion is for everybody.
Okay.
CJ, take it away.
Okay.
You don't mind?
Those of you that don't know what fusion is pretty much a picture that you will see of 2 images combined together. Obviously, it's being AI done.
Right.
But it's combined together to create one picture. So we want you guys to tell us what 2 pictures create this one picture you see in front of you.
Right. So case in point, you see a fruit.
Right.
What 2 fruits?
Hey yo,
that was crazy. That was crazy, man.
What 2
It is.
He ain't think that
It is Pride Month. It is definitely Pride Month. That was crazy.
Peach and apple.
That one took me out.
He said, what 2 fruits?
You guys gotta tell us what 2 fused to make this one.
Okay.
Yeah, peach and apple. Absolutely.
Peach and apple. You know we're not friends today.
I don't care.
Cause you over there just already
care.
involved. You don't care.
back.
All right, I'm back. Queen shit. She said, "I'm back."
He said, I'm back, goddamn. Let me sip my shit. I can sip and smoke my shit and talk my shit. I'm back, goddamn it. I don't gotta worry about the belly no more.
Oh my God, I love this. I love you. You're gonna give me some. That's my nigga right here.
Peach and apple.
So Big Brooklyn says peach and apple. Donnie says peach and apple.
What you think?
Dirty Dan says orange and peach. I say peach and apple because of the leaf at the top.
Right, the leaf was giving the apple.
Okay.
Right.
And that.
And the line down the side of the peach
Like
make it look
cheeks.
like cheeks.
Well, that's the use for cheeks.
That's what they.
That's
right,
why.
That's what I'm saying.
Got the split.
You got the peach.
How you
split.
just make a fruit perverted? That's crazy work.
It's just crazy,
I mean,
right?
bananas.
If you got that Georgia peach,
Bananas is a penis though.
That
Same
is.
shit.
It's a phallic symbol.
Yep.
Y'all just said hairy cheeks there. Damn. Hairy cheeks. I can't look
That's
at
why I
the
don't eat peaches like that. I eat them cut up in a.
I can't look at the peaches the same anymore after he said hairy cheeks. Goddamn.
Let's see what we got.
Let's see. Yeah, peach and a mango. The color. Mangoes do have leaves.
Yes, they do. Mm-hmm.
I was way off.
Peach and y'all all got the peach.
Yeah, not the apple.
I
not the
mislabeled
apple.
them. I noticed. That's the peach. That's the mango.
damn,
I
okay.
mislabeled them.
Oh, okay,
I just
okay,
noticed
okay.
that myself. My
You
bad,
point
y'all.
that
Yep.
out, I
It's the
wouldn't
peach and
know.
the mango, but I mislabeled them.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Everybody got the peach.
Yeah, the mango.
Nobody got the mango.
The two colors. We should have thought about Crash Bandicoot.
Yes.
I so thought that.
Because that's exactly what it looked like.
Should have. A relevant?
Irrelevant.
That's
a
a-
rhino and an elephant. Irrelevant. That's funny though. Well, it's not an elephant. It don't have a trunk.
It's fucking funny.
I wouldn't want this shit charging at me. Like, what the
Oh,
fuck?
Ain't charging nowhere.
Yes, it is. Big ass rhinos charging you, and they just charging you as the heaviest animal.
Cliff is in
on
the
Earth.
building. Welcome in, brother Cliff.
Oh, drop a bomb
you
for
missed
Cliff. You missed your Cliff.
Hey, we did clip of the week, Cliff. We
and
missed
Cliff is New York, so
York.
yeah.
We watched your clip, Cliff. Appreciate you for sending in one of the clips and supporting the show. Okay, everybody say hippo, rhino, hippo. I like ain't ever ate a mango that looked like that. I have. That's what the Mexican mangoes look like. The one they chop up.
Mhm.
That's what it looks like before they chop it up.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
different types of mango. That's what it looks like.
I don't
Okay.
like mango. I don't like mangoes.
You bug it.
What?
With the pepper on it?
No.
You ever had it?
Nope.
With the pepper on it? I'm gonna bring you some.
I never
Black.
I'm gonna bring you some. With the pepper.
Everybody's saying
with
hippo
the tahini
rhino.
on it. Nigga slaps.
I
Right after we
say
do some shit.
y'all say hippo rhino. I'm saying hippo. I mean, excuse me, not hippo. Elephant rhino.
Hippo rhino, I'm gonna go with too.
I'm going
I think
elephant
it's
rhino.
elephant, but the size.
Well, my nigga Stu said a high no.
High no. That's a high no.
That be the funniest part is the shit they say.
Right. I'm going with rhino.
I say irrelevant.
Relevant is hilarious.
That's irrelevant.
Let's see what it is.
Let's see what it is. Yep.
A hippo and a
Yes,
rhino.
I know.
Goddamn.
I knew it was an elephant. Because look, they got the same body shape.
Yeah.
Similar body shape.
Yeah. All right. I was wrong. Fuck that. It's New York. It's goddamn Knicks. New York. It's New York. Goddamn.
New York.
It's New York. Goddamn. Fuck
No shit else matter,
that.
nigga.
No, nothing else matter. Ooh.
That shit was
Naruto
beautiful.
and Tails.
That shit just came out.
Yep,
It came out
Naruto
too
and
good.
Tails.
It came out.
It came out. I could have not added. I could have not added.
Come on.
It's obvious what it is, but
Hey.
it just came out. Mwah.
Ah.
That's fire.
That shit hits.
Oh.
Non-tails.
That shit is tough as fuck.
Ooh. So I'm thinking.
Basically non-tails.
Yeah, it's non-tails.
Non-tails.
That's
Ah, that's crazy.
Damn.
Non-tails. That's
That's it.
crazy.
This is
Nah, that shit came out lovely.
this is after Baryon mode. Like
When I first seen that, I was like, I ain't touching that. I'm leaving it.
no. Leave it there. Leave it right there. Nine-Tails Fusion. This is after Baryon mode.
Everybody
This has
like
to
that
be
one.
Down towards yo, that shit came out.
Kurama.
Kurama Tails, yo,
Oh my god.
that shit came out too good,
Yeah.
too good. I could have not added. I was like, everybody gonna know what it is. I just had to add it.
Right.
Technically 10 tails. Zamo said technically 10 tails. All right.
Technically, well,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you count them, yeah.
yeah.
Solid, man. Solid. I like this. This is definitely solid.
Oh, don't eat.
Baldoni. Look at that. We know what it is. We know what it is.
That is a CD.
Xbox Series X with a CD player? No, a DVD. Oh no. A Xbox Series X with a Sega Master System? The 16-bit one? Get the fuck out of here. That shit look crazy. That shit look crazy. You put CDs in on this side, but you put cartridges in the middle?
What type of shit?
And then your controllers can plug it at the bottom. But you got Type-C ports on the side.
That shit all fucked up.
That shit is crazy.
What
You
that
got,
saying?
is that a volume button on it? A volume roller. What the fuck is that?
Kitty said Xbox Genesis.
Xbox Genesis.
Cliff said Genesis box.
The Genesis box. Damn.
He said you could play Halo Sonic on that.
I'm just picturing Master Chief running through a board mad fast. Look at this. The Genesis.
I thought that
16.
fusion came out nice. They wrapped that around nice. That came out good.
Yeah, that was good. That was really clean. Damn. Godzilla, Yoshi. Godzilla, Yoshi. It's Yoshi Godzilla. Yoshi Godzilla.
That's Yozilla.
Yozilla.
That shit came out.
Ain't that what he is anyway? He's Yoshi on steroids.
He's a dinosaur for sure.
Yo, this shit came out too good as well.
This is when Yoshi eat too much mushrooms.
Yeah, this is it.
Then Yoshizilla.
Yeah, CJ. He said CJ don't ever give a fuck. He just say the answer. Yeah, shut up, like people think sometimes. God
Oh,
damn it.
my bad. I thought I was playing too.
Yeah, like
Damn, Dondre, I thought I was playing
You
too.
must let him go first. Thing.
God damn.
this nigga
They
stupid.
said Jack go
He said, I thought I was playing too.
He said, "How he know you don't know the answers already?"
I don't.
No, he don't. You know, I made this one.
I don't.
When he makes stuff, I don't know. When I make stuff, he don't know.
Yeah, we don't
Appreciate
know.
you, Don Trill.
Damn.
Oh my god, y'all niggas is funny. Why are you sad, Queen Mouse? Squeakity squeak.
Oh no.
Oh, this shit's just so fun. I knew y'all was gonna get this off the top. It was just too good.
Yes.
It was just too good.
Look at the Y on his chest though. That's
What I
just-
should have did was change it from green to Godzilla color.
the black. The
Grayish.
grayish.
Yeah. Oh, it's too good. It's too
Damn,
funny.
why you sad, Ren? Tell us why you sad.
See what's next.
The basketball in his hand.
Basketball, yep.
It's a basketball.
It's a basketball.
Oh my god. He playing. This is crazy. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and a Yoshi. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it, Don Trill. I'm not gonna say it. What is this? I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it.
I got you, Kitty. I got you.
I appreciate it, my boy.
Oh god,
CK
yeah.
sends me the Yoshizilla in WhatsApp.
Oh, I got you, Kitty.
He said this is Ashton Martin and generally
Oh,
this is Herbie and Dukes.
You just want to show her son.
oh, that was too funny.
I want to show my son. Kit Ren said my stream streak in Glut stream is broken and I fixed it. I've worked on it since the day I followed him.
Damn,
Oh,
that's a long
man.
streak broken.
Damn.
Get right back on it then.
Yeah.
Start that shit over.
Wait, what's your streak for the Game Lounge?
Who, Ren?
Yeah, don't she got a streak for the Game Lounge?
Kitty does. Kitty got like 130 something streak.
Yeah. But Kitty is always
Kitty going for that 200.
yeah.
As she should.
Kitty get the 200. We gotta send her a shirt.
Something.
we
gotta do something.
Drop the
131.
charges on her.
We gotta drop the charges.
Drop the charges first.
You didn't even get 200. What kind of lawyer are you?
If she gets the 132, we gotta drop the charges.
Ashton Martin.
They say
Okay.
Ashton Martin.
I need more specific answer though.
Yeah, they say Ashton.
It's too specific.
They say
cars.
Herbie and Dukes.
Oh, it's
Stu said Herbie and Dukes.
Okay. All right.
And Ashton Martin.
What do you think? What do you
Valdoni
think?
said Ashton Martin and Generally.
What do you think?
I say I forget the name of the guys. The Dukes of Hazzard car and Herbie. Herbie.
Herbie? Okay. All right. Let's see what it is. Somebody said Free Kitty. That's the James Bond classic car. The Aston Martin. But I only got it. I want them to say 007.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool. That's dope. You know what? Pissed me off because I seen it afterwards. The gun on the side.
Yeah, that's the 007 touch up.
Yeah. The I seen it afterwards. God damn it. All right.
Okay, it's hard.
Halo Gears. Terminator Gears.
Valdoni say I know my cars.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Well, it's definitely Halo for sure. Because obviously it's the Master Chief helmet. But are we saying Terminator, RoboCop, or RoboCop got a handgun on the hip there now? And he's not fully silver, so maybe not RoboCop.
Maybe he's going for Halo.
Maybe Gears of War because of the armor, but Halo has armor too.
Baldoni said that Doom guy plus Halo.
Ah,
Dirty Dan said Gears of Halo.
Gears of Halo.
Dirty Dan, you stupid. Shut up.
Halo of Doom. I like Baldoni's answer. The Doom
Halo
guy
of
plus
Doom?
Halo of Doom.
Okay.
I'm gonna roll with Baldoni on that one.
Stu said nah, Gears and Halo.
Gears and Halo. I'll say Gears at the first two because of the gun, the front hair and the gun. But you know, I'm gonna go with Baldoni. I'm gonna roll with him on that one.
What you think, sis?
I don't know. I say Terminator and the
And
first
Halo?
one. Yeah.
Terminator and Halo.
Terminator
Okay.
and Halo. I'm going with Terminator.
Definitely Gears of Halo.
Gears of Halo. Yeah, I feel stupid.
Gears of Halo.
Yeah, I cracked me the fuck
God
up.
damn it. God damn it, Baldoni.
The Gears gun gave it away.
Yeah, I know. I pointed the gun out too. Still
The
say
gun
yeah.
for Gears, the helmet for
Halo.
Master Chief.
Yeah, I said the gun and then
Yeah,
still went with Baldoni.
You said it and it still went with Baldoni.
You know what? It's New York.
No,
It's New York. Goddamn. Fuck that.
He can do that. It's New York. He
New
can do
York.
that.
I can do that. No, fuck that.
Okay.
Shut up. Shut your mouth.
I know Cliff know this.
Shut your mouth.
I'll be quiet. Let me let y'all get it.
I know Cliff knows
This came out good too, though.
I like it.
This came out real good.
I like it.
Like I said, none of these was really hard.
I'm mad that they never did a collab though. This is what I'm thinking about it.
Would make sense.
It's annoying.
What's chat say?
Let's see.
Hold on, they got some answers in there now. We say I see
Transformers, Power
I
Rangers,
see
Gundam
Voltron,
Prime,
Gundam
Voltron.
Prime, Transformers, Power Rangers, Gundam Transformers.
Trans Rangers? What the fuck?
Vo-
What the fuck's going on?
Who said that?
Hey, yo.
You know what he meant? He meant Transformers.
Who said Trans Radio Zamo?
Zamo said Trans Rangers. God damn. It is Pride Month.
It is
goddamn
Pride-
it. It's Pride Month. It's Pride Month. God damn it. God damn.
There, I like that.
Dirty Dan said it's Death Trans Rangers. Yep. Yep. Let's roll with that. Survey says ding.
Trans Rangers. But is he wrong? You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Jesus
Is he
Christ.
wrong? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
Transformers, Power Rangers, LMAO. She knew
Ah.
what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yo, even Blue said Trans Rangers is official.
Trans Rangers is official for sure.
Oh my God, you motherfuckers are stupid.
What's happening? Falling for Barry.
Oh.
Drop a bomb first time chat for Falling
Hey,
for Barry.
Falling for Barry, what's up with you? Welcome in.
Barry,
Welcome
can
in.
we call you Barry? Can we call you Barry?
Can we call you Barry?
Hey Barry, can we call you Halle
Halle Berry, Miss Berry.
And we good, man. We appreciate you, and just know it's all about New York. It's all about New York, man.
Y'all stupid.
You stupid.
I'm stupid.
No, I'm not stupid. Samo stupid.
I know what you meant. Don't listen to these niggas.
Samo
I know
stupid.
you. I know what you meant. They so stupid.
Samo is the stupid. I ain't do nothing wrong. I just read what he said. I said, what the fuck's going on here?
Shut up. Asshole, you stupid.
Nigga, New York, butt nigga.
New York. It's New York, goddamn it. It's all about New York, goddamn it. It's all about New York.
I'm done.
Trans Rangers.
Trans Rangers is crazy. It's going down to the books.
No, it's not.
Kenny put it down in the books. Koza put it down in the books.
Nigga said Trans.
Zamo said Trans Rangers, and this shit is crazy.
He said, looks like I won right.
Yep.
Right. At this point.
At this point, goddamn.
Don't matter if you on the right,
What
nigga.
the fuck going on here?
That's what it is from now on, nigga. It's a Trans Ranger, nigga.
That's crazy.
Oh.
It said Autobots hang. God damn it.
Stop.
This shit is crazy.
He said, hey.
God damn.
He said, hey with 6 Ys.
He got 6 Ys. God damn. This is crazy. It's Pride Month, god damn it. It's Pride Month.
Oh, God.
Let them live. They doing a good job out there. It's wilding out. Autobots roll out of the closet. Damn, Baldoni.
God
damn.
Y'all stupid.
Drop a bomb for that one. That was crazy. Autobots roll out of the closet.
Nigga. I can't
Baldoni.
breathe. They're killing me, goddammit. I'm fighting for my life.
Wait.
I'm fighting for my life.
Wait.
I'm fighting for my life. It's bad for you.
Wait. I got wait. I gotta drop a bomb. Drop a bomb. Wait. Drop a bomb. Because I gotta say this. Baldoni said Autobots roll out of the closet.
The closet.
Gluttony gonna say I'll roll out.
Hey, yo.
What's happening, bro?
You know what he meant.
What happened? What happened there? Gluttony, what's happening, bro? What just happened?
I feel like oxygen. I'm
Oh,
dying.
so y'all stupid.
Why is Gluttony saying I'll roll out the closet?
Nigga on wheels, nigga.
Why are you in there?
He said he was looking for something.
No. Bro, get your ass out of there. That is not your territory, fam.
Shit.
Y'all stupid.
Get him out of there.
That was bad funny.
Oh, God, what's going on? What happened?
That was alright.
Get him out of there. Get Gluttony
Your
out.
chat is stupid.
Gonna blame Zamo for that one.
Somebody get Gluttony out.
Somebody get him out of here.
God damn.
So who was it? We forgot. Fucking forgot.
It's Transformers.
It's Transformers.
It's a Trans Ranger, nigga. We
It's a
don't.
Trans Ranger.
No, it's a Trans Ranger, nigga. We don't even give a fuck no more.
We know what it is.
That's bad
What
funny.
the
I got
fuck?
tears. That's bad funny.
What the fuck?
That's a hockey puck in
A hockey Final Fantasy weapon?
I'm still on the Trans Ranger, nigga.
a.
I ain't realize you changed the shit, nigga.
Damn.
That was funny.
A hockey stick.
Woo! All right, what's going on here, chat?
What the hell is that?
I don't know. You tell me, nigga.
I don't understand it all.
This shit look crazy.
Woo!
Like Final Fantasy hockey, Mighty Duck shit going on.
Mighty Ducks is crazy.
Mighty Ducks in Final Fantasy just made a weapon. He's like, on the road to glory.
See you later, Cleveland. Thanks for tuning in.
Later, Ren, drop a bomb for Ren.
Bye, Red.
Hockey putt.
Hockey putt.
Hockey golf.
Hockey putt.
Hockey putt.
Hockey putt is creative.
Oh, right.
Happy Gilmore. Oh, Kitty.
Happy Gilmore.
Kitty just tied it in perfectly.
Oh,
Happy
my God.
Gilmore.
Happy-
First he was a hockey player, and then he
nice
became
golf
a
player.
drop a bomb for that.
Drop a bomb.
Drop a bomb.
See? Drop a charge. See?
Drop a charge. God damn it. Drop a charge. We leave.
Can we get
We,
the court?
no. We
Can
got.
we get the court?
We need Kitty to be on.
Let me ask you a question. Where do you work? This nigga here.
She back here said drop a charge.
She the queen. She can do whatever she wants.
This is crazy. Well, chat, tune into the Game Lounge on next Sunday with Foxy Cat and no CJ. Apparently, I got replaced.
Oh man.
Happy Gilmore was good.
Happy Gilmore was perfect.
Happy Gilmore is dope.
That was perfect.
Cocky. That's what I say. Cocky.
Yep.
Oh,
It's
I'm dying.
Docky. Stu said
I'm
Docky.
I'm dying.
Golf hockey.
Y'all stupid.
Oof.
I would have done
Shit.
Oh my God. Yep. Golf club and hockey.
God.
A hockey stick. Yep.
I got another one up there.
That was the End of Fusion chat. That was super dope. We obviously know that Zamo has definitely landed the best name for
That
Trans Ranger.
Trans Ranger was
It's
hilarious.
crazy.
And Happy Gilmore was just such a good hit.
Yeah, such a solid one.
That was solid. Woo!
Clear.
What we got? It should be on top somewhere. Lasso.
Okay.
All right, this will be the last one for the day. It was a couple of questions to get us thinking.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Nothing crazy, but
Let me-
it looks
let me-
like
let me
I
get
think
chat.
they're like it's not a new game, but we'll try a different angle.
Okay.
So all right.
Let's get chat in there on this one. Yeah.
Oh, look at Zamo. Man, nigga. I know him at IRL.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know him too.
The store.
The store.
Yeah.
We talk about it
Yeah, we
afterwards.
talk about it after. He one of the homies, man. He cool.
All right.
Also just started his streaming journey, so you follow him and he's follow you as well.
Yeah, man. Let me hit the button right now while we.
Yeah,
talking.
Zamo,
Yeah.
CJ's gonna follow you.
Let me-
CJ the DJ.
Yeah, let me hit the button
You know,
right
give him a follow
now.
back so y'all can lock in. He was playing 007 and all that.
Oh, I'm already following Zala.
Probably from last time.
Yeah, maybe.
There you go.
Hey, all right, cool.
I'm gonna tell you right now. Okay, so it's something I threw together real quick. You know what I'm saying? Everything's gonna have the lasso of truth.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna give a scenario. Don't try to think too far out of the box. Pick one.
Okay.
So lasso of truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to somebody who knows. He just knows the truth.
Yeah.
Whatever he says is the truth.
Right.
You're gonna hit him with the lasso of truth.
Mm-hmm.
You got two options. You could ask him, is religion and God actually real? Like, so he can actually tell you, yes, God exists. I'm not trying to argue none of y'all faith, none of that. We're not getting into all that.
Right.
But you can actually ask this person or this deity, whatever, with the lasso of truth, is God real? Right. Is there a heaven? Is it really true?
Right.
And
which one would you pick?
And he can tell you yes. Or, you see the faith with the hands? That's the religious question. Or you can ask him, do aliens really exist? He can show it to you. He can prove it to you. He can, You can talk to an alien. He can answer that factually.
Is there only one question you can ask them, or it can be multiple?
One out of these two.
One out of either one of them.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can either prove, is religion and God really real? Or you can ask, is aliens and outer life off of Earth really real?
Which one? So basically, Chad, whatever one that you pick, whether it be God and religion or aliens, you get to ask one question.
One question.
And obviously,
whatever the answer will be revealed honestly.
Honestly.
So what route would you rather take?
Right.
I'm gonna do the aliens.
You gonna do the alien stuff? Let me ask you why. I think it's an interesting question, and the why for me is more same thing with you guys, chat. Try to give me a little info on why.
Right.
What do you want to choose, the left or the right?
Okay.
I choose the
alien. Why? But why you choose the alien?
Because for this side, I still want to have some people.
You want to have some faith,
right? I don't want you to tell me that. Now I'm just like.
I can feel that. I can feel that. I feel that.
Damn, God ain't real. Like,
so you rather say, let me know if aliens really exist. Rather
I
than
care less if they not or it is.
Rather than take the chance if you actually say no, there's that shit
right,
going
nah. That can affect my life personally.
Your
but
whole
the
view.
alien shit can't. Because
Okay.
I'm not scared. I mean,
I think I'm the opposite. I think I would want to know.
Why?
For the simple fact of understanding the beginning of it all, like
where it came from,
how things become. Because I'm not a religious person, but obviously I believe in a higher power in some degree.
Right.
I don't. You know. I wouldn't say I don't subscribe to any specific religion, meaning Christianity.
You have your own divinity or whatever.
Islam, anything like that. But I do believe in each one of them and have my reservations for how they praise their God.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's good. I like how you do that. Oh, okay, Muslims do this. Oh, that's pretty dope too.
Right.
You know, Jews. Oh, okay, I see y'all.
Right.
I
If
see
it's
you
good, you with it.
Yeah, I'm with it. Cool.
Okay, here's my answer. You finished?
Yeah.
Okay, here's my answer. I don't give me the religion. For the simple fact that I'm not that religious. But finite it for me.
Yeah.
I still don't know 100% of anything.
Yeah.
So it's just like you can say, is it real or not? You can say yes or no. Now, if you say yes and it's really real, now I know to ditch that whole I don't know if it's real part. It's confirmed.
Right.
If it's not real, I can say, well, I can honestly say as a person, I can move on. I can still be a good person. I can still be a good father. I can still be a good son.
Yeah.
That to me doesn't have to exist for me to still be a good person. But aliens existing or not, now what?
Yeah, that's how
the niggas live 64 billion light years away.
Right.
Now what?
Yeah.
What'd that do for me?
Right.
It's interesting to know.
See,
it's a cool fact to know for sure.
Right.
Now what?
Right.
Now what?
I need to believe because if people die, I need to know that they go somewhere.
But see, you're more faith-based than I am, or we are. So
yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Go? They don't fuck. They can fuck up a lot.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, where my grandma at, then, nigga?
Yep. She just gone and shit. Right. We done sprinkled the water and all that. She spent her whole life in the church. She spent her whole life in the church. Where's she at?
Right. With my grandma.
With my grandma. I gotta clip that.
Yeah, I'd rather keep that.
What time is it?
Funny.
What time is it?
Oh, chat. You gotta see the chat.
Chat talking. Let me see.
See what chat said.
Don Trill said we picking one because we already got proofs of the second one. Okay.
So he's going for number one.
Right.
So he said he already got proof of that.
Right. Dirty
So
Dan
just
said
give
I'm asking about religion because I know aliens are real. I get abducted every Sunday around 6 p.m.
That's a good one.
Drop a ball.
Who said that?
Dirty Dan.
That was a good one.
Hit him with the New
We're not done. We're not done.
We're not done.
That was a good answer.
No.
Oh, it was.
Hit him with the New York. Yep.
What else we got? This I thought this. You thought I like this question.
I like it a lot. It's deep.
Baldoni said, I ain't fucking around with no aliens. Okay, so I guess he would want to know about the religion as well. Zom said, I already believe in aliens because I know we're not the only beings in this huge galaxy, so I'm going to go with religion / God. And he's laughing at Dirty Dan.
Yeah.
And Dirty Dan is lit.
See, this question is not meant for us to like really debate what your perspective is.
Yeah.
It's just to chat.
Like,
a
which
little
one would
bit.
you pick to
and
say?
then why?
And
You know,
why?
It's interesting.
Alright,
You know what I mean? There's no wrong answer.
No,
or
it's
opinion.
perspective. It's all about perspective.
Aliens. I feel safe on that side.
Let's see what else we got.
Let's see what else we got here, chat.
Okay. Lasso of truth. Let me give the scenario.
Okay, lasso of truth, y'all. Here
On
we
the
go.
left side, we got the law system.
Okay.
So basically,
The judicial system,
We're
yeah.
gonna edit it down to when it comes to going to court.
Mhm.
Did he do it? Did he not do it? Did she do it? Did she not do it? You can just know.
Okay.
Oh.
So
Guilty or not?
I don't want to
guilty,
point at you and like so. Let's say this mic is up for grape,
Yeah. Mhm.
or PD files.
Yeah.
Some egregious shit, murder or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you do it?
Mm.
He says no. That's the truth. He says yes. Lock him up. We
Mm.
no longer have to have a guessing game of
All right.
lawyers.
Hey.
We can
Oh, okay.
automatically know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you do it? Did you not do it?
Okay, so to elaborate a little bit more, chat, using the lasso of truth within each pathway, not of whether it's right or wrong,
Right.
or which one would you pick. So if you pick in the judicial system, you are the judge using the lasso of truth.
Want to know if did you
to
do it or
figure
not?
out if
We ain't
it-
gotta. We ain't
Exit out
gotta.
the jury,
We don't have to worry about the mic getting off, and we just let off a graper
Yeah.
or a murderer.
Yeah.
No, you're getting locked up.
Right, because
or
the-
on the flip side, we don't have to worry about locking up innocent people.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
did you do it? No, he's innocent. Let this man go.
Right.
Now for the politics side,
The politics side, okay.
people running for president, things like that. We can lasso them. Now we know who has good intentions for us to vote for.
Ooh, that's good.
Uh-huh.
And the people that work in Congress and stuff like that, we can everybody that's in politics that run shit
Mhm.
can lasso them to see who has good intentions or not.
Right.
So
Like, should you vote for
should-
them, or should the country vote for them or not?
Exactly.
Ooh, that's a tough
So
Okay. So you would pretty much be the go-to. I don't want to say deity because deity is obviously semi-god,
Right.
demigod, but
you can't lie to us.
Yeah, but you would typically be the person that, and I don't want to say employs, like puts the president in the seat because you're the one who's doing the lasso,
Right.
to determine if
Right.
they are.
Well, you need to know if
it or
are you
not.
a good person or not.
Right.
Are you bullshitting or not?
Right.
Right.
Are you racist or not?
Right.
Are you gonna be equal or not?
Mhm.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So where would you guys want to put?
I'm putting it on the judicial system side.
Okay.
Because
now why?
Because there's a lot of men and women who are locked up now for crimes they did not commit or
20+ years.
as doing egregious charges. Like we just went over one. Somebody got 35 years
Absolutely.
for a quote unquote technical self defense situation. So, lasso of truth would be: was it really self defense? Or
Was it believe?
did you bring it? Did you bring the knife originally for
Right, we
them?
can figure it out.
You would figure it out right there, and that would be whether he deserved the 35 years or
Right.
not.
Right.
I would pick the same thing.
Same thing. Judiciary system.
Politicians.
I'm gonna pick
now-
politics. I'm
Okay.
gonna tell you why. Because I feel like once everybody in politics is fair-minded and equal,
Mhm.
it trickles down to the judiciary system.
Right.
So now the judges, the lawyers, everybody is
Oh, it becomes
fair-minded
clean.
because it trickles down.
So you're getting 2 for
because the
1.
people on the top that control things, the
Yeah.
politicians aren't putting up with inequality. So, like we said, that in going back to the case,
Yeah.
that would have been a fair trial.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the politicians from the top down
Would've been clean.
would have been clean.
Yeah, but in some cases, depending on what politicians, because if we are we using the lasso on every politician?
If you're in politics, like decision maker, government level,
Mhm.
you have to go through that process of being lassoed.
Okay.
I get that though. That makes sense.
So
You're
it's
getting 2
I
for
think
1.
it's not exactly. Now, I'm not saying the way you put it is more direct for the judiciary system.
Right.
But the way I'm doing it over here is more of an equal spread because everybody who's overseeing politics are good people. The judge would have to be a fair-minded.
Right.
Okay.
Not biased.
Not biased.
Okay.
It would be a fair trial on a general scope.
No, I just throw some bubble gum.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I think politics covers more.
I see where you're going.
You get what I'm
with it.
saying? So
I wouldn't do politics off the strength of even with you, like the people who are the ones that are making up the executive and the judicial system laws and everything, they're not the ones doing the direct hiring of the judges, the lawyers, what am I saying? They're not doing the direct hiring. The ones that are at the main building of the judiciary.
No, I hear what you're
system.
saying, but when you're saying politics comes down to mayors and city councilmen too, that the mayor is in charge of your the mayor's in charge of the police system.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's he would already be. He's a top politician.
Right.
He's judged fairly.
Right. He's judged fairly,
So the
but
people
who he
under,
employs,
they have to be judged fairly as
gotta
well.
go through the whips.
And if they try to wiggle around, he's going to get rid of them because he's judging fairly.
Right.
You can't do.
True.
You can't go exactly.
I mean, but people do it all the time, though.
Yeah,
not with the belt.
but you don't have people.
But we're
that's-
not lassoing the people who are being interviewed.
Yeah, but we don't
by
have
the-
a system where everybody's being checked. They're getting away with this. Now we would have a system of
like everyone gets checked
because politics is across the board. Your city councilman would be a good man. That means the guy who they're voting for sheriff would have to be a good man. And if he's not, he's going to be held accountable and locked up by the good man. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You're not going around the law.
I get it.
You see what I'm saying?
I see. I see.
I
your
just think
point.
it spreads more over here.
More-
And
okay.
especially even over time.
Yeah,
where
yeah,
good people
yeah.
get rid of bad people and good people keep getting rid of bad people. You're not getting away with the shit. You get what I'm saying? That would be my vote. Let's see what chat has to say. Like I said, there's
Chat-
no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Gluttony said, "Oh, okay." Big Steve talking about
Yeah, they talk. They
Blackbird Blue. He said, then Stu said, "So no minority report, minority report." That's what you're saying.
No, this wouldn't
So
be
Minority
like like the movie.
Yeah.
No, this is not like Minority Report. This is not.
They can't even do hood rat shit no more.
Don Trump said, "Can't even do hood rat shit no more." Damn.
Hey, just don't break the law while you do hood rat shit.
I just stole bubble gum. Don't lasso me. Damn.
Hey, listen, is it against the law? You going to jail?
Damn.
Where's my lawyer? I need that written up.
Dirty this. I'm picking law. I'm tired of jury duty.
Yeah.
You're still going to jury duty even faster now because
Well, at this point,
If you
we're
using
kind
the
of
last-
cutting out the middleman.
Yeah, you are. You're not
Did you
doing
do it?
jury
Lock him up.
Right, that's what I say.
We're going straight to sentencing or release.
yeah. I live in a place both law and politicians are wrong as fuck. Give me 2 lassos. Damn. We do too.
But Big Brook is all that crap is 2-headed snake. Right? We know.
Yeah. Politicians get this orange motherfucker out of the presidential seat. The American people deserve way more than what the fuck we have endured. Sure.
Yeah, facts.
If it's law that Orange Bastard would have locked up by now with the accusations he had. Dontrell said he
Is that's what I'm
wouldn't.
saying? If this was a lassoed system, he'd be
Right.
locked up.
Right. He wouldn't be in the
He
seat.
wouldn't even have made it to presidency.
Yeah, he wouldn't be in the seat if
Exactly.
if we had the lasso for politics though. True.
And that trickles down to how the country's looked at.
Right.
How the country's ran.
That's a
You
fact.
see what I'm saying?
That's a fact.
Bigfoot said all the crap is the
No, you mean-
two-headed snake
I
crawling in
agree.
the same direction.
I agree. Well, how it is now.
Yeah.
It's just corruption leading corruption.
Yeah.
And then more corruption.
Yeah.
In what they call it? Smoke signals of fairness, which is
Mhm.
not. We all know
That's
that.
crooked people walking everywhere, but they not head of the country. We at war right now for nothing.
We always at war for nothing. We
Crazy,
always at
bro.
war
That's
for
crazy,
nothing.
bro.
Somebody pointed out, look at all the people that turned up and destroyed Manhattan over a basketball game. New York, we love it.
Yeah. Look.
But he was just like, and the other point that he pointed out is, he's like, how come all these people don't turn up when the pedophiles get caught? And the government is, Epstein file told you what's doing what. He's like, the streets is empty.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, but I understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
All those people that the city, the amount of cops couldn't control them. The power was with the city. Power's with the people, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, energy goes in the wrong direction. Not that celebrating New York is wrong, but then you're destroying shit.
For what reason?
You get what I'm saying?
That's
Like,
what Sunday was done.
it's pent up energy
Shit that
going in
we
the
need.
wrong direction.
Yeah.
It needs to go in the right direction.
Right.
When you put that energy in the right direction, you can't be stopped.
Yeah, you
we
get a
become
lot
Like
of
the
they
juggernaut.
waited for something just to get the anger out.
Just to
and
get
they
the anger
chose
out,
the-
exactly.
Yeah, that's
You
not
know what I
good.
mean?
You fucked on shit we need.
Sue said, not nothing. Oil, always oil. Greed. Dontrell said, oil that never belonged to us. The strait was open to all. Now we gotta pay per day to access. Agent Orange is an absolute dickhead.
Yeah, they don't like Agent Orange.
Who does? A lot of
Yeah,
people
that's
do,
true.
Some people do, so.
All right.
It's a,
They voted him twice, so some people like him.
yeah,
Right, that's what
and
I
they
said.
gotta like him some way. I think he was very popular on the first.
Okay. In real life, you're not becoming a Pokemon trainer. Pokemon training don't exist.
Uh-huh.
But let's say you get to actually choose one of these original starter Pokemons.
Mhm.
In real life now.
Real life,
Which
yeah.
one would you have?
Charmander.
I'm going Bulbasaur.
I get it.
In real
For
life,
healing.
Charmander's burning your house down.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
That tail can't. I'm good on that tail. I'm good on
Yeah,
this
he ain't
nigga
evolved.
sneezing and then the fucking fireball flies out of his mouth.
Yeah, but the tail doesn't catch fire to anything that it lays on.
I'm good on that. That's my favorite Pokemon, but I'm good on that. This nigga, the whole shit he'll be burned up.
Yeah.
Bulbasaur can actually heal people.
Right.
that's true.
Give me Bulbasaur. In real life,
You
give me Bulbasaur.
I'll change mine.
He's tethered to nature.
I know he healed.
I know Bulbasaur heals. I would say that too. I honestly believe that would be a good medical system. You'd be the
Bulbasaur's
best
in
doctor
real
ever.
life. Them niggas
Right.
can cure you.
Yeah.
They can help grow shit in the yard.
Right.
They're tethered to. They're useful in real life. Like this
Right.
is not a Pokemon world. We're not going to forget about.
Right.
You just get to choose one of these. To
Right.
have.
I'm
Give me the
gonna go with
Bulbasaur.
Squirtle. I'm gonna change my answer from Charmander.
Charmander is like
to
actually
to
dangerous
Squirtle.
to have around
Yeah,
as a pet.
that's true.
I'm good with that tail being on fire. bro.
Yeah, I'm going with Squirtle for the simple fact of, with Squirtle you can do a lot. You can do healing, but you can also save people too. Like when I mean
It's lifeguards.
saving like lifeguard base, firefighter base, and anything.
Water shit.
Yeah, anything that requires
Yeah, I mean,
water.
I can agree with that. But I'm always gonna go to healing. In
Yeah,
real
I'm
life,
gonna do
I'm
that.
gonna
I'll
always
change
gonna go to
mine.
healing.
I didn't know he had healing.
Imagine your fucking pet dog can heal cancer, nigga.
Yeah,
Yo.
I'm good on. I'm
A
taking.
lot
I'm
of
going.
people be allowed.
yeah. Charmander burning Bulbasaur house down too.
Yeah, but you only get to pick one.
Yeah.
The Diggs, what's good in the hood, everybody?
What up, the Diggs? Drop a bomb for the Diggs. You came in at a good time. You know we on that New York shit today.
He said, "Look at the taxes, y'all. Regular groceries, your kids' food bills be, bro. Bro. That's the food.
Yeah.
The cost of living is just getting out of hand in America.
It is. It's getting worse though.
It's bro. Like your fucking food bill now looks like what rent used to look like in the '90s.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Like, come on. Then we ain't got no choice. Because what the fuck? We gotta eat.
You gotta eat, and then they give you bullshit to eat.
Yeah.
So people chose.
Diggs missed her charge. Yeah, Diggs, you missed Kitty Charges.
Yeah, you missed the charges. She'll fill you in though.
Yeah, she gonna put you on for sure.
See what else we
Don
got.
Trust
Do we have
said
another
technically
one?
Bulbasaur was always part poison as well. Nurse Joy used him
He is part
medicinally. I think I could do some good with him.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
I agree with the Bulbasaur approach. I'm still gonna roll with Squirtle.
But I think in a real life aspect outside of Pokemon World, Charmander is the most dangerous one.
The Diggs said he
Yeah.
a Spurs fan.
Diggs said, "Well, I'm a Spurs fan, even though I'm
that's crazy
I'm a
for
New
you.
York City, so I'm exiting myself out of that shit." Oh, nah, nah, Diggs. What?
Yeah.
I thought we was cool. Nah, wait a minute. Let me pull up the big screen. Diggs, what the fuck, bro? Like, what we doing here?
Hey, yo, GK, yo, what's going on with you, Chubby?
Come on,
My guy,
man.
Chubby. Welcome in, Brody.
Who that? Chubby Too Cool?
Yeah, Chubby Too Cool.
Drop a bomb for Chubby. Wait.
Nah,
Before I hit him
Spurs
with the New York Chubby, are you a Knicks fan or a Spurs fan? I want to know before I hit you with a button real quick. I just need to know. Knicks fan or
We
Spurs
need you to
fan?
answer the question, Chubby.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go, Chubby. Let's go, Chubby.
Tim Duncan, my favorite player of all. Tim Duncan is a GOAT, though. I ain't gonna lie. I
Yeah,
can't hate on Tim Duncan.
But Tim Duncan couldn't stray. I was watching the TikTok video. The dude was on something. He was like, "Yeah, let's go New York. Fuck the Spurs. Fuck Wemby. Fuck Tim Duncan. Fuck all of niggas. I was like, damn, Tim Duncan not even on the team no more,
play
bro.
no more.
I said,
He's a
damn,
damn
why he
big
gotta
Drake
catch a
voice, not
stray?
you.
Damn, Diggs. Damn, not you. Damn, no Tony Parker. Damn.
Yeah, Tony Parker was the shit too.
Yeah, he was. He was.
And Manu
Listen,
Ginobili.
They said, fuck all the Spurs. Everybody on that side of the boat. He was going
New
in.
York, nigga.
I was like, Tim Duncan ain't even on the team. Why he got to catch a straight?
Tim Duncan at home chilling.
It's crazy work. Back to it though.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got.
I had another question that I didn't put up there. I didn't know if it was too crazy, but I'm gonna ask it.
Okay.
Same thing. Last or truth. You get to either talk to the Pope or Hitler. You could ask any one of them anything you want, and it's gonna be the truth. You heard that, chat?
I don't really know much about it.
You heard that, chat? The same game, last or truth. That's why they put that one up there.
Last
you
or
could either
truth.
talk to the Pope or Hitler.
You can talk to the Pope or Hitler.
You can ask them anything, and it will be the truth.
Give me Hitler.
Why?
I want to know what made him do this. Because if I ask the Pope today, the Pope can't really tell me exactly the events that happened then. Hitler can tell me the events that happened then and his reasoning for doing so.
Okay. I would actually think I would actually pick Hitler as well.
Wow.
Just think Hitler. You guys ever like read up on him? He's an interesting person.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, he's a very. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
He knows a lot of shit. The shit he knows,
mm-hmm.
And like CJ said, why certain things, this, that, what caused this, that, and the
Yeah.
third. I want to know.
I want to know what got you
know.
there and what put you in that.
But you gotta be prepared mentally to hear something you may not want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hear it. Don't mean I'm about to do something to him because I'm not going to be one of them people in that
Hey,
gas
guys, good
chamber.
question. He
bullshit.
said, is it the current Pope or can we choose a specific Pope? A specific.
Good question, Dontre. Good question. That's why I said the.
I said the
Hitler.
current Pope is what I was thinking.
That's the exact reason why I said.
But
Hitler,
the reason why I
because-
put the Pope is the Popes are in charge of the Vatican. The Vatican is known to be the grill of knowledge.
Yeah, I get
They
it.
have secret technology from like the old world. Like it's a lot there with the Vatican City and underneath and all that. That's supposed to be like where all the real secret knowledge and from the Knights Templars and Jesus, all that knowledge is supposed to be down there somewhere.
Don Cho said the Pope today wears Air Forces. We got photos. He might not be a
So I'm
weirdo.
saying, yeah, he got access
but
to that
the
large
Pope
ass
still
library.
would have access
Yeah,
to the large ass
There's a
library.
lot of knowledge down
Exactly,
there. It's
G.
a lot of knowledge.
He
down
got
there.
access to the large ass library, but did he go through every single
I mean, you can just
like
ask him to
thing?
give you access to it. Can you give me access to it? Is he gonna say yes? Then take it in there.
Well, he said the question you asked, can you give me access to it? No, I can't.
He can. The Pope can. He can walk you right in there. He can do whatever the fuck he want.
He can, but under whatever their reason and religious reasons, he can say no, I can't.
No, technically no, because if you can, and the last of truth make you tell me the truth, that CJ, can you take me in there? You're gonna say yes because you can.
You got slapped with that belt.
You can't say no.
Like physically, yes, I can take you in there.
You can. You just can. Can the president walk into the White House? Yes, he can. He can. Yeah, he's with me. What are they gonna say no?
Yeah, true.
You're gonna have to get all of that, but they can't tell you no.
Yeah, good point. I agree with that. That's a good point.
So you technically have access to eons of like lost, forgotten knowledge of the world and shit.
Yeah.
It's all there, supposedly. So there is a plethora of knowledge there.
Don
I'm
Cho
still
said,
going
run
Hitler.
run them keys, Pope Johnson. That's
I would still go Hitler.
I'm still going.
I'll still go Hitler. That old world knowledge is something different.
Yeah.
Now old world knowledge is something different.
I want to know what got you to that point. What made you do these actions, and was it worth it?
Well, my thing is what really happened because we don't know.
Right.
Right.
We reading out of
We
some
know
shit
based
that
on what
somebody
was
wrote.
told to us.
Right. And the winners are the ones who write the story. That nigga might tell you some shit. You be like, nigga, we ain't never heard this shit before.
Right. And your
Like-
story is completely
Like, what the fuck
different
is
from
happening
his.
here? You know what I'm saying?
Right. That's what they told y'all.
That nigga like, that what? I didn't do that shit. Like,
Is that
that
what they
nigga might
told
be
y'all?
flabbergasted. Like, what?
And you said, pull up a chair.
Blah, blah, blah.
Pull up a chair. Let me pour you something.
Let me tell you what the fuck went down, nigga.
Let me pour you something.
Nigga got a whole different version of the story and shit.
Right.
You know, I'm just saying, I would love, I would go that way.
Yeah.
But the Pope is sitting on access to knowledge that's like a lot of those other questions. Is God real and is aliens real?
Yeah.
That nigga might actually have access to those questions.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? Like he might actually have the answers to that. With that type of shit. You feel me?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Dontra, this is Kitty's emote. That's Kitty Tat emote. That's Kitty Cup.
Yep. Same with this one.
That's her kitty night. Kitty. I forget.
Kitty Tat's cups.
I forget what the actual cat is called.
Yeah, kitty cat.
I just know it's Kitty Tat cat.
Yeah, they
Kitty Tat cat with the knife.
Yeah, so
yeah, we support. If you guys got merch, we got merch right here on the shirt. We got merch. Check it out on our website, GameLounge.live in the shop. But Kitty got merch. Koza got merch. Cliff got merch. Everybody got merch. We support.
Yeah.
We support.
So again, exclamation Discord. Add more you guys clips to the Game Lounge clip section, and we'll watch some more of them next week. Also next week is Foxy Cat's coming up for the interview.
Yes, indeed.
And
Our
innocent friend.
Wow. Kitty Cat's going to jail.
Look, she got a bottle, not a knife. See, she ain't got no knives.
Oh, she behaving today. Now she's trying to be cute now. Before it was nice.
She said, "Cheers." Look.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Look. Come on. Look. Cheers.
Also next week, Kitty Cat going to court. God damn it.
Innocent.
Kitty Cat's court trial against my lawyer, Koza and Koza Esquire, and her person getting interviewed is actually the goddamn lawyer that she's with. You nigga, you're not on the case. You're not on the case.
Kitty, he took me off the case.
He ain't on the goddamn case.
So let me be the judge then.
No.
I gotta be something.
You got Judge 200.
No.
In the building. All right.
Koza, I need you to chime in on this. He's taking me off the case as a lawyer, but he wants to be the plaintiff and he wants to be the judge.
I'm not the judge.
You are.
I'm not the judge.
You are.
I'm not the judge.
Who's the judge?
I'm not Judge 200. The Honorable Judge 200.
Okay, so who are you?
I'm GK. Fuck is you talking about?
Yeah, get this nigga out of here.
What the fuck is he talking about?
He said I want to do something.
The Honorable Judge.
Get him out of here. Security.
Judge
Nigga
200.
said, no, nigga said you the bailiff.
Yeah, you the bailiff.
Nah.
Yeah. Bring the Bible and shit.
No.
Oh my God.
But anyway, the decision will all come down to the jury of peers. We everybody a vote. Either we lock Kitty up or not. It's up to you guys. Both lawyers will make their case, and Kitty's going to jail. So anyway.
This is crazy. It's unfair. It's unfair.
Nigga, you work here.
Somebody write Koza.
Koza's sleeping right now.
I'm going to write it myself. I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something.
Yeah, Honorable Judge 200. You feel
200.
me? So, anything else for the people?
Nope. That's it for me.
Let me see. Before we close on out, did I have something else? Nope. Nope. I'll save it.
Save it?
I'll save it.
Okay.
Yep. I'll save it because it's. I'll show y'all this though.
Yeah, we on some Ace Attorney shit, bro.
Yep.
Kitty go to gym. Make sure you tune in next week.
I'll show y'all this though because New York was coming. New York was on some real shit right here. It's real.
They can't see. Oh shit. Oh, I seen that shit.
Real New York shit.
I seen that shit.
I gotta let it.
Yeah,
Turn the light off. Turn the light off.
You can't send it to the laptop? I mean to the.
I could have did that.
Back it up some. Back it up some.
No, it got worse. It got worse without the light off.
Oh.
Yup. There you go.
Stay right there. There.
Who the fuck you looking at? New York, nigga.
Yeah, I turned it with the New York on.
Bitch, let me get a bacon, egg, and cheese.
Yeah. I should have just hit the button. I'm sorry. Hit the button.
That's mad funny though.
Hit the button. Let me see if I can pull it up just regularly.
Cheers, Stu. W stream with W Game Live. I appreciate you, Stu.
Appreciate y'all.
I got it. There we go. Right there. That's the picture. Yeah, I could have did it that way. Made life a lot easier. That's the one I was looking at.
This
Yeah.
nigga right here.
Yeah.
Why is it so perfect though?
There we go. New York is up. Just keep that Ike Turner hand strong while we on
Mad love.
on that damn court.
The
We
dick
was
shit,
not
I'm
playing.
done. Yeah, that's him right there.
Yes, indeed.
Nah, that picture just hits different, don't it?
Oh, it hits
This
definitely
shit
different.
hits
Definitely
different.
hits.
This shit's fire.
It definitely hits.
It definitely hits, but hits different now.
Yep, it hits
It's different now. It's different now.
Alrighty.
All right, CJ, do your thing.
Wife, welcome back.
Yes, I had a great time. This was a great stream.
We missed you.
Yep.
I missed you back. If I'm not here next weekend, I will definitely be tuned in to see Kitty. You're
Yeah.
You're innocent.
Yep.
Don't listen to this man right here.
Yep.
I got my claims.
Apparently, I'm not allowed to be a part of the trial. This is not unfair. I gotta just bring a Bible and a damn cop outfit.
Bailiffs are needed, man.
Not if you got the lasso of truth. You don't need it.
I'm fucking crying.
I'm not against you, Kitty. It's your jury of peers. It's your jury of peers.
For me, I say this every Sunday.
Yep. Small shoes.
This is definitely more than just a podcast.
We love it, man.
This is a show.
It's a family show.
This is community. This is love, and we can't do this every Sunday without you guys. So make sure you tune in every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be prepared next Sunday for our girl Foxy Cat. Clap it up for Foxy Cat. She will be here, obviously interviewing. Is it Mr. 200 or is it GK?
It's Mr. 200.
So she's gonna interview with Mr. 200, Judge 200.
No,
yeah.
no.
Shut
She interview with me.
So is the judge Mr. 200?
No, that's a whole different guy. He ain't get here yet.
This guy.
Yeah.
All right. This guy.
He being airdropped Sunday.
He's being airdropped.
He's being airlifted in Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. On the roof.
On the. We got a roof. We up top.
We got a roof. We can see him right out the window.
Yeah. Just Judge is coming.
It's coming. Anywho, make sure you guys come Sunday, June 21st.
Which is also Father's Day.
Which is also
yes, it is
Father's Day. Clap it up for the fathers who actually do their thing. Clap it up for all the fathers, because there is guys who are there. They just are not allowed.
We're just quiet.
They just. But then the ones that just don't give a fuck. They just say, nah, I'm popping babies out everywhere and fuck them kids. Team FTK.
Fuck them niggas.
Yeah.
Nah, so just
Happy Father's Day to
Happy
all the
Father's
good
Day to
fathers.
everybody.
Good fathers, basically, right.
And Mr. 2 Golden Crest 200.
Yeah.
I gotta say the right thing.
Yeah.
'Cause
I'm not the honorable Judge 200.
I get it.
You know? he mad he can't be on the case.
Apparently. Apparently.
Well,
I'm just gonna be the administrative assistant with the papers. Just,
no, bring the Bible. We need to put the hand on the thing.
No. I'm not playing with Jesus.
I'm not
about to play with Jesus.
I'm just happy that to have you guys back.
Appreciate you.
Got the original cast back, and I love it. It was a good show.
Yeah.
The vibes is back where it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you guys lock in next week for Foxy Cat's interview.
Yes.
And the case.
Yes.
And watching more clips.
More clips.
Shout out to Big Brooklyn for winning clip of the
yes.
clip of the week.
Yes,
for the
clip of
first
the week.
one.
Something Marvel.
Next week there'll be more. And y'all already know what time it is. We love when you guys come in and tap in with us. See you guys next week. Y'all